Welcome back to another episode of the Nine Summoning Insight presented by AT&T. I'm going to kick it off with just me and Thorin here for a few minutes while we wait for Kayys and later on Locodoco to join us. How's it going? Show number 2 today.
Yeah, not bad. I'll just take a nice sip of a generic drink that no one will ever know what it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Must be coffee.
Thorin already getting tilted to start the show. Great.
It's all right. It's all right. We're just gonna calm it down. Listen, I know. I'm just gonna think of it this way. This is like when someone's cooked dinner for you. You're not really feeling like exactly that, but you know the dessert's gonna be straight fire. There's a bit nice, delicious trifle or a cake there. So we all know we're gonna wreck TSM in about half an hour or an hour or so. So.
I'm so the main course ready. Is coming. Chill out, everyone. I'm so ready, Thorin.
We've got the perfect guest to be the TSM apologist as well, haven't we?
It's even better because what we're going to do, I think, is we're going to go into a history of TSM's coaching with a former TSM coach and talk about how they can't actually find somebody who can stay with the organization for long term, or in Part's case, even want to stay as the coach as moving to the GM role. So very exciting. I'm really pumped about that.
By the way, though, mad shout out to Path. This guy gets it. He figured out a long time ago. So if you're the TSM coach, you get blamed no matter what, even if you win the league, and you eventually get fired. But who will always have a job? The guy who has to keep hiring the new coaches. This guy's a fucking genius. He figured it out, mate. He's got it. It's like that joke, isn't it? He's the guy selling the shovels to the gold rush. He knows you might not get any gold, but some idiot's going to buy the shovels.
I love it. I'm very excited for that. Good to have Locodoco back on the show. We are going to have Kayys up first, though, from Origen. So I'm also looking forward to that because I actually thought that this was an extremely winnable series for Origen based on how G2 played. And in fact, they threw game 2. So there is a pretty interesting world, but there's a lot of questions I have for him about their draft and their strategies going into it. I have to admit, I didn't get to see all of the Fnatic series. I've had a lot of life issues, like having a kid and also being on Flashpoint. So that was the series I couldn't quite finish this week, so I'll be less knowledgeable about that one, unfortunately.
And for people who don't know, by the way, since Kayys actually has a fairly extensive history for someone who doesn't have the biggest name, he used to be like an analyst / coach working with Fnatic in 2018, the year they had their best runs ever and were in like the World's Finals. Then he was with Team Liquid last year, where obviously Team Liquid beat IG, went to the MSI final, played G2 in the final there. And then this year, he's with Origen, who's playing So he's played like 3 different incarnations of G2 as well. And he's seen the Fnatics of the world. He's been in Fnatic. He's been on the other side. So I think this guy could have a very interesting perspective on some of these elements. Because one of the things I've enjoyed on having it on past shows is he seems to have a very good mind for like how stylistic matchups work, which actually is, I think it's kind of an underrated element in the scene. People like to do like specific lane matchup or the draft or something, but I like to know like where the strengths lie and how people see a game matching up and where you were trying to get your edge and where you know you're going to give something up. That's to me my style of analyzing the game.
Yeah, I also think especially this was a really interesting stylistic matchup between these two teams, and I think you could really see that Origen was trying to navigate that. So very, very cool stuff. Any other things? This is, by the way, we're still not in the studio, obviously, with coronavirus. Hopefully, eventually, when the pandemic is down, we'll be able to go there again and get everything rolling on that front. Obviously, has been delayed for many reasons now, not just the coronavirus reasons. This is the last time we'll be doing it on this day. It just had to be on Wednesday this week because Thorin and I were both working on Flashpoint yesterday.
By the way, we should mention this, since obviously we've been doing Summon Insight since 2014, but there is literally a new member to the Summon Insight family. The future co-host, Maximus Keon Michaels, exists in the world now, Monty. By the way, I'm just going to say this in true Thorin fashion. This is the real celebration of the birth of your son, mate. Is when we reference it, I'm just going to do a Thorin rant, which is this. I've seen some people out there, obviously because he has an unorthodox name, who've been trying to come on that angle. Now, if you're really trying to tell me, anyone out there, any fucking John, fucking Jim, Bilbo, whatever your name is, if you're going to tell me you think the name Maximus is a shit name, child, please. That's straight fire. That's also, you can even obviously shorten it to Max, so it even has a version that wouldn't be weird.
Exactly.
Like,
that was the point.
You can be weird or you can just be a normal dude.
Yeah, that was exactly the point, was to give the option for it to be normal. But Maximus means the greatest in Latin, and since it came from me, It clearly is already.
Also, I have
the
a joke
greatest.
for you. I'm not going to mention who I said this to, but I actually said also to someone that if I ever have a kid, I'm just going to name them like Augustus, just so my kid outranks Monty.
That's great. I literally thought about Augustus because I was,
Sick.
Susie and I were going through some Latin names like and so Augustus was definitely something under consideration. You can also choose Octavian, which was the Emperor
His
Augustus's
original
original name before he became the first emperor of the Roman Empire. But yeah, I like Latin names. I think they're cool. So
Well, for some reason, I mean, it's probably because English has a base in Latin as well. Like they just sound cool to the English ear, I've noticed.
yep. It's all right. So someday our kids can inherit this because, as Riot tells us, League of Legends will be going on forever. So this is definitely this show is, and League of Legends are definitely going to go on long enough for that to be a feasible enterprise. All right, let's take a quick.
TSM by then might even have figured out how to use junglers and have a coach. Anything could happen. Give it enough time.
I mean, TSM will probably just entirely be a website network at that point in time. They'll have long ago given up on actually being an esports team. But anyway, a man can dream. A man can dream that of a day when he. Do I dream of that? I'm trying to think about whether I prefer TSM not being in esports or whether I prefer continuing to make money by shitting on them.
Remember, here's the only downside is if they ever became the absolute best team, because then we couldn't really shit on them anymore. I want them to exist. It's like I've made this joke many times and people think I'm trolling. When people make a lineup that I don't like, so for example, I wasn't a fan of Broxer on Fnatic. Oh, I don't want Broxer to leave. I want him to stay forever. Because then when they don't win the championships and they don't ever go deep at Worlds again, like I want these idiots who think he's awesome to suffer. So in that scenario, I want TSM to exist forever. I'm basically the fucking like archdemon who is going to guard the pit part of the area that TSM's in. And Reggie's just there like, really, must I suffer forever? So, yeah, that's right. With a pitchfork again, stab him again.
I see how it is. The Schadenfreude is overwhelming. I appreciate that.
Schadenfreude is one of the only consistent things in this world, isn't it? Like
that's
happiness, that's very fleeting. You can't guarantee when that's going to work. Sometimes you think you're going to get something to be happy. Tell you what, Monty, I've never been disappointed when TSM loses in hilarious fashion. It's never failed to perk me up a little bit, put a little spring in my step, start whistling songs, swinging around lampposts.
Especially at times like this when they were really the only other threat besides.
That's even funnier. Exactly. I even agree they should be in the final. That's what makes it funnier. It would actually, like the years, for example, when they lost to Clutch a couple of years back, they actually weren't that good as a team anyway. So it actually wasn't as funny in that case. But yeah, I was creative. I worked with it. Still got some out of it.
Okay, well, with that in mind, we are going to take a little break here, get Kayys on, and we'll start with some LEC conversations. Obviously, a good place to start because you Euros are still awake right now, so we'll be back in just a couple. All right, we're back here with not Locodoco. I realized I didn't change your Twitter yet. Hold on, let me fix it.
Yeah, don't want to be mistaken for Loco.
I do not blame you whatsoever. Here we go. I fixed it. All right. So, awesome. Welcome, Kayys. I know it's good to have you here. You're a minion of Thorin's favorite person, Nikolai Nyholm. So, always good to have Nikolai Nyholm associated guests on this show.
True.
Listen, there's a lot of good people out there living under terrible tyrannical dictatorships, and I'm here to free those people. I'm not here to blame those people for the actions of those above them. They're just doing their best in a corrupt, filthy world. I'm just here to free their spirits. All right, I'll take care of it for you, Kayys. You just keep grinding away, mate. I'll deal with the rest. Yeah, don't worry about it. Thing is, Kayys, you're in a very weird position because I want to get your take actually. How have people reacted when you've been in Origen? Because when we had you on Lost and Local last year, obviously because you were in Team Liquid, everyone in Europe was just like, fuck this guy. Even though it was like, he was on Fnatic before, and now obviously you're on Origen. So has the tide turned a bit to people? Are people still as hostile?
I mean, not really. I think that generally everyone, the community sentiment on me is back to being neutral or positive. But for some reason, Origen, like the fans of like Origen, they just like if we play one slow game, they just call it slow team. But yeah, it doesn't make much sense. Like so, but trying to reason with some of the communities, yeah.
So can you get into your general job? So just for people who don't know you and what you're going to be doing on Origen this year?
Currently, I'm like the strategic coach and head scout, so I do like all match preparation, and then I lead the the path or the discussion generally on like how we should be approaching the game strategically with our current players. So, and then in the off season, I also do like assistant GM work. But
Okay. Well, you want to get right into this series then that you guys played against G2? Because as I intimated in our little intro there, I really thought that this was an incredibly winnable series from you guys. And like I was heartbroken for you after watching game 2.
yeah.
And there were a lot of throwing moments in this series where you guys had incredible advantages, huge pressure advantages, and instead of just playing the patient game, like you guys and playing the proper slow way, you said you got criticism for playing slow, but instead of playing slow, you would do things like we would see the teleports come in to try and end the game, like game 2 when you guys had the top and mid inhibitors down, you had Baron had just spawned. There was no reason to try and force that fight with the TP, and yet it still went off. And not only that, it was kind of a, I would say, it was a catastrophic series of errors because it seemed like not even like on that one play, it seemed like not everyone was even on board because Nukeduck, I think, could have just gone in on Azir and just won the game right there. But for whatever reason, he just sort of left the tanks in the back line while he was dealing with the Nico zoning instead of just hitting the back line at the same time. So it ended up that Caps was able just to style on you with all the Affilio chakrams.
I mean, the way it works, like, whenever you're like playing against Aphelios and he's walking in, the way Azir wants to play the game is he needs to be able to auto attack or hit damage back whenever they walk at him. But like we were not coordinated or on the same page, and that's if I remember that fight correctly, where no one was fronting for Azir, so Aphelios could just walk up and hit. I mean, in terms of the series overall, I think it was completely winnable. I mean, the small decision-making errors and micro errors, like the team fight in top lane, I think it was in game 2, where we should have won, but like Elias gets double bombed by Zillion, Elias being upset, like, and then like small decision-making errors, like swung it towards G2. I mean, G2 is a hard team to beat, but yeah, definitely sucks to lose. It was really two different styles going at each other. So
yeah, I want to start with some of the draft priority in this series because I found it really interesting that you guys were so invested in the set, and also because you were transitioning it into the jungle most of the time for Xerxes. What was the philosophy behind that? Were you trying to was this a pick that you eventually wanted to use to punish caps on some of these less mobile AD carries, like we see you letting the Aphelios through?
I mean, yeah, like we were not as afraid of Caps' Aphelios. Once he'd take him off his top picks, we thought we could handle him a lot better. And then Xerxes practice set in practice, and we thought it could be a good pick that we could also take away from them. And it's also a flex pick. So I personally like Pantheon more than Set in jungle, but Set is definitely still good, and it's really good for team fighting.
Well, it just seemed like you were trying to. One thing I also noticed about this series, and I think I've noticed it in general throughout the playoffs that we've seen in Europe and North America, is that there is generally a much higher priority of Herald over early Dragons in this series. Correct. Was that part of your plan coming in? Because it seemed like you were swapping really, really actively into the top side with Upset and Destiny, and also Destiny was roaming a lot more to get more topside pressure in order to get the Herald. And it seemed like if you got that gold lead, your compositions were excellent for team fighting, and you were going to be able to get control over the Drake later on in the game with the gold advantage.
That's kind of the general point. Our Herald priority was definitely raised in this series. The main reason we were swapping early for Herald is because we think if you can break G2's first mid T1 tower, the game is a lot easier to play versus them because they play into side lanes a lot. So if you can break mid T1, you can force them down middle faster, which then will inhibit how G2 can play their mid game out, where they can separate more if mid tower's still up. So Mickey would be more unlocked if mid tower's up. But that's why we were raising priority on it.
Were you also telling Destiny just to roam more in general? Because he was much more aggressive than I've seen him in terms of trying to make plays mid and top.
I mean, yeah, that was also in the game plan as well. To get out of lane more once we snowballed the advantage bottom, or once we got the early leads in bot lane to actually transition it more towards the team.
Being as obviously you won't be playing them again this split like you guys have done for the playoffs, can you give us some perception of like what was the G2 that you were going to play in this playoffs like? I mean, obviously you've literally, as I said in the pre-section where you weren't here, it was me and Monty. I said when you were Team Liquid, obviously you had to game plan against them when you were in Team Liquid, and going back, there was even past G2 lineups you've been against with Fnatic. So what was this G2 like in contrast to last year's? Like, how was it different in terms of how you attack them or where your strengths lie?
I mean, I think this year's G2 is obviously weaker. Their early game, I think we exposed it. A lot of their early game problems. Like if you can pick lanes that cannot get dove or are hard to dive, G2 the way they snowball early game is not as consistent as like a Fnatic. I think. So I think this lineup is a lot less scary with Perks in mid, to be honest. Mainly because Caps, I think, Perks like demands a lot of the jungle attention, which is really good. And it actually punished us a couple times, but Caps was more free flow, so he could move off mid a lot more, I thought.
What's great is there's already going to be the people who didn't listen to any of the pre-game segment who are going to be like, how does he know that about Caps? He was in the fucking team that Caps was in, you idiot. He was in the team, literally.
Yeah.
Just saying, you know.
So
and he coached against Perks.
Yeah, so I think this iteration of G2 in their current form is a lot less threatening. Last year's G2 was a lot more free flow, I think.
What do you think their best strengths are, though?
Best strengths? It is their mid jungle 2v2. Like they're one of the few teams I think in Europe that can actually play through mid jungle, and like Perks is like pinging the wave probably of the minion. He wants Jankos to come on, and then also I think Jankos is a pretty big strength for them. This year also Wonder's been playing a little bit worse, so they haven't been able to play consistently through all three lanes.
What did you think on that angle then? Because listen, when you guys played in some of the past series, I mean, I said this when I did a different show, my European show with Veteran before the Rogue series. I was like, listen, I know why he likes Finn and why he bigged him up and thought he has potential, but it's like Alfari was going to destroy this guy. He's like the best player in the league, in my opinion. So Finn can be good in his own matchup, but that was never going to be a good lane. Now, in that series, I think Alfari died one time in 4 games. So that puts the exclamation point on that. But the problem is this.
You don't even have to say much about it. You can just show the score lines of Finn and Barney. And
it's a rare case of where the scoreline kind of just tell the truth. But the thing is, going into this series, Kayys, I agree. Like, people on paper, again, would have said, well, what's Alfari going to do? It's Wonder. But like this, I don't know. The spring split Wonder isn't the Wonder of last year who looked like a monster. What have you thought of that angle?
I think Alfari is probably the best player in the league in totality. He just plays top lane, so he can only do so much from top lane. And I think that is a strength that we have over G2 that we are actively going to use. And it's pretty obvious. Like it's not like I'm disclosing hidden information here.
I will also just throw out there, like in this series, obviously they weren't just playing for scaling super, like they were picking fucking Renekton. So, you know, like let's obviously this wasn't the meme version of OG.
Yeah, I mean, like in order to beat G2, you need to be able to fight with them, like have good enough mechanical players, because they're gonna force you to fight them whenever you reallocate lanes, and they're going to like actually I think that's a weakness of theirs. They fight too much when they're behind. So you have to be willing to fight and beat them and mechanically. So yeah.
Well, that's one of the things I also think is why here's a little like personal predilection. I actually like players who, it's different what you say publicly, but privately, if I talk to a player and he's delusional, like about his own level, a teammate's level, team strengths, like I actually find it hard to talk with them because it gets boring. It's like, so you just don't even have any like realistic perception of who you are. So as a result, right, I genuinely think this whole narrative where the G2 guys have had to spend the whole split mind fucking themselves that actually the Caps and Perks swap was fine and there's no issue there. The Caps is going to be awesome with it. That's been a bad thing for them, dude, because what you're saying there, I can't get why, if you really believed there was no problems with this year's, but well, last year's team was probably like, I think it might be the best fighting team to ever come from Europe. They could fight in all portions of the game and they were just amazing at it. Like, obviously they wanted to draw you into that world. This year's, as you're saying, like, I could certainly see moments in the game where that would be a mistake to try and do that. Like, there's times where they don't need to.
I mean, that's also one of the main reasons they lost to Mad, is they were fighting way too much when they don't need to.
They started off those fights. That was more, in fact. They both started most of them and then lost.
Well,
so
I think you also expose, like we were talking on the last show last week about, well, what is the difference here between Perks and Caps? But here's something you guys did that exposed G2, I think, really hard in this series. In spite of your loss, I thought that like G2 looked like super bad in this series.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was more your mistakes that lost this series rather than G2 doing amazing shit. But what was so fascinating to me is you basically just left Caps down there and you're like, here, have some turret plate gold. We're going top. We're going to take Herald and take other parts of the map. You left Caps alone to power him up. You did not focus Caps until you got into those team fights. And that's where the set ults like started to come in, where you were focusing him a lot more. But you were not at all scared of giving him resources on this team as long as you could take it away from Wonder and Perks. And I thought that that was like a very interesting strategy to go with to try and power up your guys with the gold early on and just be like, okay, Caps, here's plates, enjoy.
Yeah, like we it's also the way the games were flowing. Sometimes like Origin, at least whenever we understand that we can't salvage a situation, like we instantly go into trading sides of the map really quick, and then I think that's something G2 don't. Like G2 will then reallocate back and match you, and then they'll just fight. Whereas we will recognize, okay, game flow, it's better just to swing it top. And then we weren't afraid of Caps, even though he did beat us. So we should have maybe been a little bit more afraid of him. But I think it's with our advantages on paper, you just tried focusing on Barney.
I have a rare draft-related question. It's not usually my field, but I've got one just because it's something I noticed. It's something we'll ask local later for LCS as a region, right? I'm always puzzled by the teams who just are all in on Tahm Kench. I've noticed your team, you only played one game of Tahm Kench this entire split, but every team against you is picking it. So is it that Destiny doesn't like the champion? Do you as an analyst not think it's that good? Because everyone else seems to be obsessed with this shit, man.
It's not.
I mean,
good.
yeah. I mean,
it's a crutch. It's a horrible crutch.
We just don't think we don't value the pick that much. Obviously, we play it. But like, if they're just going to keep giving us Nautilus, then we're just going to pick something that we think that champion's infinitely more useful than Tahm, because Tom's ultimate nerf, where now like his level, he only really has an ultimate at level 11. So we just think it's a champion that's obviously strong in lane, but you need to play towards the Tahm Kench lane, or he's like utterly useless the entire game, because he needs to be opened up on the map because he doesn't have tools to actually engage. So he needs to be ahead in the game. So.
That doesn't seem to fit then with most of the teams that are picking it, because I'm seeing teams that don't even play to the bot lane who are picking it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, those teams are playing it incorrectly.
I also think that this is another one of those times that it really exposes Caps' weaknesses, because if the theory here is that it's not... So, BG2, what is your strength with Mickey? Oh, it's playmaking support, right? You want Mickey to be out there roaming on the map and making engages. Okay, well, Caps, what can he play? Oh, he can't play mobility 80 carries. Oh, so then we have to pick
Except Ezreal, but that doesn't count.
Yeah. But then, if you think about it this way, then if he can't play mobility 80 carries, then he's going to be playing this Aphelios, which is his best champion this year. And so you have to be able to save him, especially when you're facing a draft like the ones that we see out of Origen in this series, that are going to be able to target him in the backline with relative ease. Like set ult is just point and click. So you're actually gimping Mickey overall and his normal presence on the map. And what do you get out of it? You save Caps, who's not even a great 80 carry. So your value, the value that you're getting here is actually just complete shit.
Correct. I mean, I do think G2 need to in order to beat Fnatic. Well, first they have to beat Mad, but in order to win either of these series, I think they need to actually abuse that they have a support mechanical advantage. In most scenarios, like especially I think against Mad, like I think Hylissang showed that Kaiser's obviously good and he's a rookie, but there is an advantage that you can have in that role. So
I'm also not trying to present this as something that G2 has normally done. Like, I just think it was a one-off mistake in Game 3 of this series that you guys won. You know, it's not. It was the one time he played in this series. It's not like Mickey's been really prioritizing it, but in many cases, like, I just don't like Tahm Kench because I think to get real value, like, your support has to be bad your support player has to be kind of bad, and your AD carry has to be so good that it justifies saving them all the time. So I think for some
Neither
teams,
makes sense in the case of G2.
in my opinion, no. I think that's like just a horrible, horrible misallocation of resources. But
that's also why. But also like this also carries on to the point where like if you can take down mid T1 really early versus G2, it limits how much Mickey can actually impact the map because he has to be mid lane or show generally if you can push in deeper on mid wave. So if you can break it down early so he can't separate and play more to the sides, then that's also key to limiting him, I think. But
is this mostly what you predicted in terms of their drafts for this series? Because I was really surprised to see Jankos come out of the gate here on the Trundle.
yeah, we did
like
not see the
Maokai Trundle I thought was really weird in game 1 for G2. And they're trying to play what is a poke composition here with the Ezreal, Yuumi, and LeBlanc with that front line that can disengage. But that's definitely not what I would have expected in a game 1 from G2.
Yeah, we didn't think they would pick Trundle there either, to be honest. I think their priorities, obviously, as the series went on, they completely dropped it. So I think that they would even admit I think that was just a misreading by them. But they did win that game in most convincing fashion. But we really need to fix how we start in best of fives. Like if we actually start game 1 well, then I think we actually might even be the winner. Because like, when you're the underdog, game 1, if you can win it, you do put all the pressure right on the favorites. So, but
why did you pick Kayys in the last game?
That's mainly on Elias or upset. Like we had like our tier of AD carries, and we thought we wanted to try maybe pick him a different matchup. Kayys can be played into most lanes if once you take away like Syndra, and yeah. So
I was just surprised because it seemed like you were really prioritizing a lot of AoE team fighting in this series, and Cap's got the MF this time. I was just curious. It makes sense if you're continuing on that road, because if you don't pick the Kayys, I feel like you would have to pivot to a different style of composition, right? You'd have to, you're going for an Ezreal or something. It really changes your core strategy that you were trying to play against G2.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we did not think the strategy was flawed. Like we think, if anything, we had the correct strategy for our team on how to beat them. So that the game plan was not our problem. It was like we just like against G2, like you have the smallest of micro like decisions, and the small decision making is really what changed it. Because like it's a lot of the fights, like either like one we went too deep and we threw a 4K gold lead, or the bot lane like on a 3v3 we say go on Thresh and then we hook Pantheon. Like it's literally just some of these small things that we should actually come out ahead, but we just made a few mistakes. Like there wasn't that many macro errors, I don't think, from us in that series. Like off the top of my head, maybe one where upset overstayed top, autoing a tower, and they chased us down. But there was no glaring, huge strategy problems that we had.
We should talk about the other 2 teams in the playoffs. And so what about Mad Lions? Because obviously Mad Lions won the first series, but I have a hard time taking a lot of like strong conclusions from that series in general, because I thought some of those last games were just all over the fucking place and were a clusterfuck of like happenstance that will never happen again in a game, probably in between these 2 teams.
Yes.
Both those last 2 games, I think, apply that entirely. Yeah. So here's my question for Mad Lions is, if they're going to have these issues in the bot lane in G2, Mad Lions looks like one of the teams that's tailor-made to beat them, but straight up, forget all the bullshit of the first season. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I think G2 Mad Lions can actually stand mechanically with the top teams, except in top lane. So if I was G2, I would try to abuse that if I was going into Mad. I think that's Mad's biggest weakness. Is like we feel like if we even played Mad, we would win in most scenarios, just because we do have Alphari and they have a Rome, and then we would just implement a similar top focus style and abuse it. So I think Mad are definitely good. Shadow was a surprise for me this year. Obviously he looked good in National League, but I didn't think he'd be this. It's hard to tell the exact transition. And anyone that says they know how to scout perfectly and can anticipate how a player is going to fit in, then But they look pretty good. Humanoid's playing better than he was last year. So, and Carzzy seems to not have nerve issues. But also, I think this being online helped them a lot.
Almost certainly.
Yeah, like you can even if you put us in a studio, I think that would look a lot worse. But yeah, I think the nerves would actually get to them probably.
Yeah, I think that is almost unquestionable. That's why we do have to put all the caveats in with where and how these games are being played, obviously, during this pandemic. So I was saying to Thorin in the pre-show, I didn't get to catch all of these games because I had a bunch of real life stuff happening to me or Flashpoint things happening to me. So I don't have the latest read on Fnatic, but we discussed last week, having seen Fnatic, that they look like easily, I think, the best team in Europe right now. And the more that I see of this version of G2, the more I'm just inclined to agree with that. Plus, they got a very convincing victory here, just completely sweeping Mad Lions.
I mean, I think Fnatic are going to win the finals. I think the way Fnatic plays is a little bit different than G2. G2 play more onto side lanes. Fnatic, they have Weepo, like they'll trade tempo on the map to set up the map so where they can always play on 2 lanes in the mid game. And they're like, once they get control in the game, they will basically hold the control and then shift it whenever the objective starts up. That's like why they beat Mad, because Mad will just still contest you on all the neutrals. Like whereas you see us, if we are not favored in the fight, we're going to be playing opposite side map and trading. But Fnatic just play a super fight focused style in the mid game.
They've got the players to do it as well as the key, right? You've got to have the personnel for all. Like that's the thing. People always make that mistake. You don't decide the style of play and then look, oh, do I have the pieces to work? It's like making some food. You have to know what the ingredients are before you have the choices to what you can make out of it. You can't make a fucking stew out of the ingredients for a cake, can you? It wouldn't work. Whereas you wouldn't believe how many coaches out there are trying to make a fucking stew out of all the ingredients for a cake.
Yeah, you have to look at your own team, like what the strengths are, then choose your playstyle off of that. Especially
that's also why I think Fnatic is going to win, because like they have what's probably the best style, I would guess, for the meta at the moment, because they have the players that, like, where's the weakness mechanically? Where are the bad players? They don't even now have any stylistic mismatch, it seems, in terms of the balance of the players in the team. Like Selfmade really does seem like he's just activated even people. Like now Whippo doesn't have to just rush to the bot lane like he sometimes did last year. He can actually just play his lane and be a fucking monster at times.
What I think is really convincing too is that we discussed this last week and we saw that trend continuing with the Senna play, which is that we saw one Senna game from Reckless the entire regular season, and then they swap over to this very heavy Senna focus in their first series. And then this series, we see the Senna again, but it's back to more of what we saw from Reckless, like the misfortune. So they're showing that they are more strategically diverse and can get that carry potential, that carry role out of more positions than I think they showed really in the regular season at all.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I mean, I really wish we could rewind time and replay the Fnatic series and just ban Zillion. But yeah, they can now. Fnatic are very hard to draft versus, because they can also play. They have so many top lane picks that Weepo can play that fits the style. Like Malphite just randomly appeared. Like Malphite, Zac, Set, just like really fight engage style. So yeah, this is the strongest I think Fnatic's looked if you compare last year and this year since the Caps leaving. I think Selfmade being integrated to the team, I think he must communicate better than Broxah did last year, because the way Weepo is managing his wave state is a lot better this year.
Put it this way, it was implied on when I did a show with Whipple. I forget which one, if it was Elite United or if it was one I did with I Will Dominate, but it was basically implied. Here's the thing I like about Whipple, Kayys, is he won't outright flame a teammate, but he knows how to like cleverly phrase it so that you can basically get the flame if you read between the lines. And basically, he sort of implied that Broxah, like he had to direct Broxah as to what to do at certain points in time, which would make a lot more sense if you look now, because Selfmade looks like, I mean, he's got the perfect name, hasn't he? He looks like a guy who just takes the initiative himself. And if you're someone like Whipple, then if you interact with them, great. But otherwise, you can just play your game. You're not like propping this guy up.
Yeah.
I have a question about the Origen versus Fnatic series that you guys did, because I think it was difficult to anticipate that Hylissang would pick Trundle when you banned the Zilean and Tahm Kench, which would be the
Yeah.
enabling champs for Senna. And I think you definitely couldn't have anticipated that he would become this like split pushing ultra force within the game. Why didn't you just ban Senna?
We were not as afraid of it with Reckless on it. Like, we'd think, if anything, obviously I think we would have changed that now and maybe banned it. But
Sure.
I think just the way we wanted the draft, we didn't think that Senna was going to be a major problem. We thought Ezreal Yumi was going to be the answer to it, the Senna Tahm Kench lane, but then we didn't anticipate the Zilean pick, which then threw us off 2 games. Like, the first 2 games, we didn't like actually think Zilean was the issue. Yeah, so.
By the way, I also appreciated that tweet from Alfari where it actually is quite depressing. I don't know if you saw this, Monty, where Alfari basically tweeted, like, when they were eliminated, like, kind of the gist of it was like, sucks, like, don't know how long, I'm going to keep playing without ever winning the championship, or if it's ever going to happen for me. And obviously my joke is I imagine him typing all that and then turn into Nukeduck. And then Nukeduck's like that meme where it's like James Franco with the new song. It's like, first time, get ready. Just listen to Block, like, get a line and get a number and get in queue.
Yeah, it's true. Alfari, because Alfari got his start on Renegades on our academy team, actually, when he was, I think, 16. He started playing 16 or 17. He wasn't able to play in EU LCS at the time, and obviously, like, even at that moment in time, a really, really talented player. But if we consider Nukeduck's been playing. He hasn't been winning since 2013 when he was back on Lemon Dogs, right? That was his first world championship. I'm trying to recall off the top of my head. So yeah, Nukeduck is. Oh man, I feel terrible for that guy, and I'm curious to talk about Nukeduck and where you think he fits into a system, because he's very much like, he's got all that depth to his champion pool. But is he ever going to be? He's so consistent, but is he ever going to be that factor that pushes you over the top? That's still my question about him.
It's all well and good using League of Legends, but I prefer to use references people know. So the famous cartoon by Hanna-Barbera, I think it is, Wacky Races. Obviously, Nukeduck is Dick Dastardly. His plans are all sick. He's getting an edge in the game. He's looking like a surefire to win this thing, and his car breaks down right before the finish line every time. God damn it! And then someone wins, and there was just some idiot who would just drive him before him. Just opened the way right up.
Nukeduck can be fit in on any team.
Exactly.
Ideally, he's not going to be the reason you lose a series. So that is that is something that can be valued, but you really have to think of what other mid laners would be actually better that you could replace him with theoretically. Like, I don't think there's anyone other than like Caps or Perks. And also he gives you a lot of strategic depth in terms of your gameplay, because he understands the game pretty well. So
yeah, I just, for me, I look at this series and I'm like, oh wow, Nukeduck's doing a really good job of executing an Azir game plan. But where it really kind of falls apart for me is, I hate to keep bringing this up, but the TP fight when you had the inhibitors down in game 2. So it's like you see the Maokai coming from behind, right? And then your set goes in and they're all in the back line trying to focus on Caps. And Azir is just standing there, like poking their front line and their Nico with the spears. And he has his ult the entire time. And for whatever reason, he won't just reposition his Sand Soldiers and just go in and fuck up Caps in that back line. He just allows himself to get zoned out of the fight. And then Caps cleans up your tank line one by one and they chase you down and you lose the game. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is the most Nukeduck moment.
Oh, sorry, no, you wouldn't sell on a short cost not. So,
I mean, like, why? This is like classic Nukeduck. He gets you there to the 1 yard line where you're like, I can win this game right now, and he is technically playing properly, but in that moment where someone makes a bad play, he cannot save it, or he won't save it. He chooses not to save it.
Yeah, that sentiment is generally, correct. That is, I think, his biggest flaw is whenever an error is made, like we go too deep, he does just do the correct play, which is like he doesn't change his play towards the mistake that's being made sometimes.
Yeah, that's what I saw. Like I was really like blown away by that entire sequence of events.
So that's like we know that is a flaw. So instead of us trying to change it, because it's not going to change, because it's like year 10. We just have to plan better around knowing some of these
Wait a minute. Listen, that was a brilliant coach's way of saying it. But I've got a question for you straight up. I also suspect he doesn't want to change, mate. Like a lot of these great mid laners that we've had in EU, they built their own philosophy on how the game works. I'm sure within his world, like he probably thinks the way he played is like generally correct. Like that's probably the way he thought. Like I'm sure his logic is, well, someone else could have done this and this, and we shouldn't even be in that position anyway. And am I wrong?
No, you're right on that one.
No,
that's the problem though. This is a real issue though, Monty. It's one of the problems with like star players and people who've been very good, and the team game and the idea of just switching to whatever the current meta is the things that made that player great. They're not just going to abandon them all because other people do other stuff. So you see it all the time in sports. You have a lot of really great players who have amazing careers, and then maybe they don't ever win the championship. Maybe they just have a really good career. That's why the joke is they're in the Hall of Really Good instead of Hall of Fame.
Well, it's true. But in that moment, like, who made that call? Because it seemed like Nukeduck was like, no, wait, don't do that when they're going in, right?
I think it was, I don't remember exactly who, but it was whoever was diving the back line. I think it was obviously Xerxes and
Alfari.
Barney.
Yeah.
Alfari. So, yeah, that's just like, you can't make that mistake against G2. You have to actually close it out. If you make mistakes like that, then that's an example of one of those small instances where we set up the map perfectly. Like we put in so much effort into getting the map state correct in a good spot, and then we just like make a fundamental decision-making error from like one or two players, and then we fumble it even harder. So instead of us just like losing those players, we end up like getting swept ace. So.
See, the problem here is, Monty, everyone's criticizing Nukeduck for what he isn't. Why don't we celebrate him for what he is? Like, this is a guy who really loves League of Legends. I've told people this story years ago. At the end of, I think it was like season 5, when he'd been in that whack Roccat team, where he actually had Jankos and Vander, but the team was just a train wreck, and it came a 7th, I think, both times or something, never made the playoffs even. So it never got close to what he wanted to accomplish. Because he'd had like a bunch of high-profile chances. I even did an interview, and I said sort of in the interview, like, is this it for you? Is it kind of like next year, Boston? And he was like, no, I'll probably just keep playing for like 5 years if I like it. And I realized in that moment he was a guy who just loves the game. So here's the thing, Monty, because he loves the game so much, he doesn't just want to play the game and then win in 10 minutes and then go off and party. He wants to keep playing the game. That's why he likes to extend the game as long as possible. So what I like about Nukeduck is this guy loves it so much. He's almost in that. He's like doing tantra. He just wants to extend the experience to the absolute zenith of human perception. And much like a really brilliant lover who's spiritually enlightened, he always finishes second. Just consider it. Like,
so considerate. And you know what? That explains actually that game, because he was like, wow, we got total control over this game, total control over this series.
Exactly.
What if we lost this game so we can make sure that we go all the way to 5 games?
That'd be even more fun. Play 5 games.
Didn't end up working out that way. But
I mean, I think leading into summer, we're not going to change much strategically. We're just hoping that at the performance curve, maybe we just have a better day versus G2, because we just need, like, in order for us to beat Fnatic or G2, it really does come down to like the individual, like, smallest decision. So
well, it's also like if you consider what's happening within the team, you guys were so effective, I think, in your planning for this series, which is why I'm really happy to have you on the show today and discuss it. But it's like, when you have Nukeduck, if that one thing didn't go wrong, then it would have closed out perfectly, and he would have looked very controlled. So to me, it's more about just making sure that random shit doesn't happen in your comms, and like some player doesn't just like fly out and just do something weird. It's about drilling the rest, because that's not a Nukeduck problem, right? Nukeduck was doing the right thing.
He's just an symptom of it.
Yeah, it's just like when the shit hits the fan, Nukeduck freezes up. But there's no reason to throw that shit at the fan. Like, Alfari did not have to just like reach around behind him, grab a handful of shit, and then hurl it into the fan. So like, how do you fix that problem?
I mean, that's mainly what we have to attack going in the summer. Obviously, how we play from behind, I think, also needs to improve. And like how to separate jungle support, because like a lot of situations you need to play away from each other and not together in order to actually pressure the map faster. But yeah, it's more about limiting the shit getting thrown at the fan and not exactly trying to change Nukeduck, because we don't think Nukeduck is like the core issue.
Right.
He has core issues, but like
Yeah, of
obviously,
course.
it's like we have to work around around it, and
Since you were referencing like the very, very famous narrative about OG playing super late game and just for scaling and like you're just almost like trying to win like a stamina race and just the other team eventually will make enough mistakes, right? That was definitely last year's new Origin at times as well. Like they had some of those elements in them. But the funny thing is, obviously, that was Team Liquid that you were a part of last year. People would have made the same criticism at times about Team Liquid. So my question is this: I don't have anything against scaling. I don't know why people have done that in League of Legends. I made this point years ago. You can imagine why with some of my favorite players. That like the angle that like the guy who's aggressive and tries to win in the early games a real man, and the others are all pussies waiting. Like I've never gotten that because it's a fucking game. Like if strategically it makes more sense to win off scaling, then that's actually the most optimal way to play the game. But whereas last year, TL, arguably, it wasn't the most optimal way, but you will win a lot of games. How do you contrast that? Like, why do you not want OG to be like that this year?
In terms of Origin this year, I think it's just against Fnatic and G2 because they play such a contrast style that we have to actually. I wish there was more best of fives and more best of threes because you would see a lot of these stylistic mismatches more instead of these best of one format. It's not that we prefer to pick scaling. Like, saying you pick scaling does not mean you don't play early game.
Yeah, of course.
So obviously it's not an intent, but we do think we have one of the strongest top laners in the league. So why wouldn't we try to abuse that winning on side lane and winning by splitting in the mid game? So we should actually do this more, where we put Barney on a winning side lane mid to late game, and then we put the enemy on a timer where their top laner has to group and they have to force an objective. So we're forcing the enemy on a timer basically, and that comes down to our players as well. Yeah, I mean, the way you should view the game is you need to be like if the map is like this, like the waves, you need to be playing on the same wave that the enemy are playing on in order to cycle correctly on the map, so we can force them on timers more. That's how we view the game. Fnatic view the game. G2. The map is like a total circle, but Fnatic, instead of like there's ways to break the cycle as well, like the TP flanks. So you drop wards on the shallow side whenever you're cycling, and then if like Caps or whoever on G2, like whenever they're retaking that side, whenever you're scouting a team, if you see he walks up alone often, without any support, you can actually plan TP flanks to disrupt off of that trend. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Were you happy with how your matches went in playoffs? Because it seemed like you had some interesting game plans. It was just, I think in the Fnatic series, it looked to me like you were thrown by their draft, and in this series, it looked like you just were thrown by yourselves in game. Like the drafts looked really good to me, stylistically against G2, but the execution was just barely not there.
Yeah, that was our sentiment on it. I mean, I'm overall satisfied. Obviously, super disappointed that we lost in the manner that we did against Fnatic, where we didn't adapt fast enough on banning Zilean or thinking they could play that. And then against G2, we were ahead in game 2, game 3, and game 4. We just fumbled like we were like 5% or 3% short. That's how it felt.
I mean, in general, it must have been hard to game plan for that first Fnatic series, because this is the one where obviously they played Zilean twice, and then they had that fucking like Trundle that just took over the game, like with the center, that bullshit lane. So like they didn't even play straight up. It's not like they just played normal meta champs 5v5 and then they won.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to game plan like you take it for those teams, and you have to like play like be able to match them mechanically is the first and foremost. But I'm overall happy with it. Obviously, I think Fnatic are going to win the split because I don't see a world where they don't see how we approach G2 and not just punish it. And if they play Mad again, we already saw how that went. So I think a peaking G2 can probably still win. But I think Fnatic have such a big advantage. Like, how can you expect G2 to play Mad on Friday and then play Fnatic again 12 hours later? So the 24 hours later. That's like a massive advantage, the format.
Especially because, here's another angle people haven't thought of. In the bracket so far, Whereas they would if they'd have won that first game. G2 haven't played Fnatic yet in a series. They've just played their scrims and then whatever they played in the season. Like you guys, obviously Fnatic has already played Mad Lions. And if they played for G2, it'll only be in the final. So if in theory, they don't even have to put as much prep in for Mad Lions specifically. I'd just prep for G2 mainly. And if you play Mad Lions again, a lot of that even will apply. It was like a few days back. So like I feel like all the edges are on the Fnatic side for me. And in fact, when I look at it, some of the big games that G2 has won in this playoff run have just been individual hero shit. Like that won't carry a whole series. That wins you a game.
Yeah, I think Fnatic are going to take it. They're playing way better, in my opinion. And it's harder to play against Fnatic's style because you know what they're gonna do, but it's like how do you stop it? So you kind of have to match some of it. But
I also think it's like you say with the format, the way that things are working out this year is that because you have that 24-hour period. Well, okay, so let's say Mad Lions wins again against G2, right?
Yeah.
What the fuck do you care if you're Fnatic? You already know how to just slap those guys around, like. And here's the thing, you can't prepare for them because if they're going to do something different than they've already done, then you're already not going to be ready, but you're ready for their normal play, right? Totally ready.
Yeah.
And
I
then
actually
and then
think there's like no world.
Oh, and by the way, you have even more series of G2 play to watch.
Yeah, exactly. And then you guys, I think, showed some really interesting stuff about how to beat G2, like you're saying. I think your strategy going in was super good. And so you can already game plan for Fnatic or for G2 now. So Fnatic will probably spend all their time, if I was them, prepping for G2 or 80% of it. And then you head into the finals super ready.
Yeah, that's what Fnatic should do. There's no world where I can see Mad Lions beating a Fnatic because they play a similar style around going for neutrals and like they very neutral focused team, but they just have worse players. And then you can't abuse that you might have, like they don't have a top lane advantage against them because Fnatic, how they break open the early game is Weepo's often moving off top into mid and bottom. And in order to actually abuse Fnatic stylistically, you have to be able to go through top wherever they're not sending their resources, and Mad Lions just don't have the players on the roster that are good enough to actually abuse that. So I don't see a world where Mad Lions can ever beat Fnatic in a best of 5. G2, I think Fnatic could potentially lose to G2 if Perks and Yankos like
the players are obviously there for it, yes, to make the massive games.
Yeah, if they can step it up, Perks and Yankos, and like really hard carry because that is Fnatic's weakness. Sure. Nemesis early. The champions that Nemesis generally plays are you can actually gain an advantage there if you have a good mid jungle. And G2 have that, so I actually...
And more of the scaling late game champs for obvious reasons. It's just his style.
Yeah.
That's also my biggest problem with envisioning a world where G2 wins. Even if I have, like, right, well, Perks has to have a great series. Like, Wonder has to get some of his form back. Fnatic even has the fucking jungler to neutralize Yankos to some degree. Like, he's not just going to have a massive edge in the jungle. That's one of the reasons why I really do think... this is the reason why I wish we hadn't done the role swap in G2. Because that was, that whole bullshit narrative of, like, well, part of why we did it is, like, keep ourselves fresh. Because, we were dominating. Bitch, you wouldn't have dominated this self-made Fnatic. You would have had problems with this self-made Fnatic with your old lineup, the team that never lost any best of 5s until FPX. Yeah. Like, you didn't need any challenges. Your challenge was just coming and actually playing better competition.
Yeah, I mean,
that would have been a great matchup. I'd love to have seen that game.
I also didn't think that Perks was fine in this series, but he also wasn't making sure these games were won. There were a lot of mistakes made, especially in games 3 and 4. Like, his Zoe was a total non-factor in that game. And then his Akali, I'd be curious to know what happened from Nukeduck's perspective, considering that he just got that kill for free on Perks, and also Akali not necessarily the greatest champ right now, even though he was able to put on some side lane, like split push pressure later on. I think that pick was kind of bad. And for me, where it turned around was kind of Yankos having complete control over your jungle, because that Olaf matchup into set is so good for the Olaf.
Yeah. In order for G2 to win, Perks needs to play like 2018 Worlds Perks. Where he is like a clear advantage over Nemesis, because that is an area where you can attack Fnatic. That's like a win condition almost for G2. They need to like really pressure the mid jungle. If you're gonna make this role swap back to mid lane, you gotta yeah, you got to play, I think, a little bit better if you want to beat Fnatic, in my opinion. Because you're taking one of the best players in caps and just handicapping him by putting him in bot lane, where he clearly is not nearly as much of a threat as AD carry. Like where he doesn't have as much impact on the map from level 1 because the role is not built for that. So. Yeah.
I'd also even add in every person, I mean, you were in Fnatic, every person I know who's worked with Caps on teams where he was the mid laner, another element they always big up is that he gets this implied value that you don't see if you're just a fan of how he works with the jungler. Well, that just goes away when he's an ADC. Like, you don't have that. Like, you don't get any, they can't play off him. He's not communicating with him. He's just a guy in the bot lane. So if that's such a big edge, then it's taken away from his game when he's not in that position.
Yeah, it's definitely, and also like he makes too many errors. Like, Caps had this problem on mid lane as well sometimes where he would be too far forward. But that's like, you can't make those errors as AD carry. They're a lot more damaging.
Well, especially when you play Aphelios 24/7.
Yeah. Getting him on immobile carries is a good idea. That's also why they have high thresh priority, because that allows for Mickey X to lantern and reposition Caps often in middle stack. So, yeah.
So is it? I guess we're just agreeing that it's kind of a foregone conclusion that Fnatic is going to be the championship team here in the spring split.
Yeah. I
well,
think so.
Put it this way: the way he said it there, I think is perfect because, like, obviously people know I'm a critic of Nemesis, but not in the way that people imagine. It's that listen, he's on the best team that has some of the best players in the entire world at this point in time. Actually, he's just the worst player on the team. But here's the problem: good luck attacking that. Like, their actual team's almost set up so that you can't. Like, if you build your home game to do that, you're going to lose anyway. So that's the reason why I think this team's fucking perfect. Like, I would obviously choose a different mid laner myself, but it doesn't matter. There's no one else has the tools to necessarily beat them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. A peaking G2 can do it, but it's very hard to punish the weaknesses of Fnatic. Like we had a hard time versus it, but we thought if we won Game 4, actually, we were gonna win Game 5 just off the momentum, and Reckless probably was gonna tilt, but no. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Fnatic are gonna win the split. I think anyone that thinks G2 are gonna win are just the G2 faithful, who have blind faith.
He's got the 2018 goggles on, still dreaming. Because here's the problem. This is almost why, I've made this point before, it's almost why it was even more genius right now that last year they so heavily memed all the losses, because it means that people, like, dude, I'm pretty sure like half the G2 fans think that they're still joking around and that they're just going to kick in a high gear and win the fucking split. It's like, they've been trying their hardest, boys. Like, some of these losses, they're really trying. These aren't troll picks. They're actually doing picks now because they have to do weird picks sometimes. Like, this is not a joke. This isn't like they're so good they're messing around. This is what they think is really good play. So that's an indictment right there of the difference between this year and last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotta. They still beat us, but this is definitely a significantly worse version, I think.
All I'll say is, listen, if this was like the NFL and I could publish your payroll and their payroll, Kayys, I think people would be very impressed with how your team did against theirs.
That's another entire topic.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you had it's not like we drafted these players and it was like, right, I'll pick this one for my team and then him for your team. You know, you're working with some, put it this way, a far cheaper roster than theirs.
Well, even cheaper now that Astralis publicly announced that they were reducing everybody's pay voluntarily, by the way, voluntary. Everyone's volunteering. When Nikolai Nyholm walked into the Origen house and he was like, hey guys, how are you feeling about getting paid? Everyone independently just raised their hand and said, can I please have 30% less?
Exactly. It's like back in the Soviet Union when all those people used to come forward and confess that they were part of a big plot against the state and that they should be sent to a gulag. So, you know, you have to believe people, right? You have to believe people.
So credit. You're now doing it with even less than you could have done it before.
I think the public perception of the LCS and the LEC would be a lot different if you actually posted dollars spent per win.
Exactly.
I completely agree with you.
Which, by the way, here's the thing. I was joking, but I have a serious point there. I think it would actually make people have more realistic expectations. Like, they would be a lot fairer to some of the budget rosters that are mad overperforming and are doing fucking amazing. Meanwhile, there's certain rosters, again, I won't name names, but that spend money that you would be shocked if you knew how much they were spending on some of the players that are average as fuck. It's really disappointing, especially in LCS, by the way. It's even worse over there, obviously.
Yeah, LCS is like a conundrum of overpaying players that are just fine getting 7th and
Exactly.
like it. Yeah. So
That was your experience over there? I mean, we can dive into some of that too, because you know, famously worked with Team Liquid, the highest spending team in either the LCS or LEC.
You know what we should ask him then, logically? I mean, I know you left, like, wasn't it? You left like partway through what, summer?
right after
Split
Rift
last year?
Rivals.
Right after Rift Rivals. Yeah, so like that's like week 2 or week 3 in summer, I think. So, what are your thoughts on like Team Liquid's collapse? Like, obviously, I mean, first thing I would like to know is, does this give us, like, do we have a control group now for what Smithy does in Team Liquid, for example? What do you think?
I think it's a lot of factors, but it's really hard for me to comment on it because only the people inside the team know.
Would you like
Can you
some
give us some general thoughts?
Would you like some people outside the team to know? I would like to be one of those people.
You don't have to be. Listen, you don't have to target people. Just give us some general thoughts on the problems.
I think they're obviously at the start of the split they didn't have their full roster. That obviously hurts.
Sure.
They took a different approach this offseason where they did not boot camp, and I think that really bit them in the ass. I think the December boot camp is like pretty crucial if you're adding any new member to a roster. Their core issues got exposed or compounded from 2018 or 2019, yes, where like motivation was an issue, and that also doesn't help. It's expected. Like they won 4 splits in a row, but like you can't expect people that are like the average age of that roster is like 25 relative to like 18-year-olds. There's just more going on in people's lives at that time. That's still not an excuse for not boot camping. But also like their mid jungle communication, I think, is also another problem. Like Broxa isn't in the right locations depending where the waves are, and I'm not sure how their coaching staff, who is all Korean, can coach jungles with 2 Danish guys, and that be an optimal system without having to have translation.
Like, without getting too detailed again, like when Smithy was in the team, I'm guessing he just handled all that, and it didn't have to essentially be micro in that regard, right?
Yeah, it was more free flow. Like I think it's like Brox is obviously better mechanically, and that's a clear mechanical upgrade. But they need to implement a system where the laners maybe like they'd have to structure even their communication early game. So, but that's like obviously a problem. And then double lifting Core JJ looked pretty worse this split, and then Impact also just had his worst split. So a lot of it I think is performance related. But obviously I at least trust in the org. Like I don't think their TL is gonna slack and give up on summer. Like I think they're going to like put in like crazy amount of hours to rebound. I'm way more confident in their performance in summer over like a TSM.
Why is that?
Mainly because
probably watched the FlyQuest series.
He didn't. He didn't though.
All right, don't worry.
I have not watched it, but it feels like Team Liquid's problems, now that they have more time to fix them, are solvable. A lot of it is synergy, and TSM, it seems like I briefly glanced at skim the games, but there's some of the games last week, but it seems like the way they are still using jungle mid is just not optimal. Like if you watch C9, the way Niski plays off of Blabber, it's a lot more. It looks a lot more fluid. Where I just don't think Bjergsen's style of play is outdated, basically.
In what regard?
He doesn't move off mid fast enough. Like he's not moving to fights, I think, at a quick enough pace, and it doesn't make sense to have a player like Dardoch and then not play like that. But
it's all right. They stopped playing like that, which is how they lost the series. So
here's the thing:
they just go on to scaling tank junglers, and it'll all be fine.
Since Team Liquid, we know the one thing they have is the money. The obvious move is this: just fly in Young Buck, or as I call him, the Broxer Whisperer. Have him go into a fucking teepee with all incense and sage and whatever, and fucking make a special tea, and then tell Broxer, drink this. Like, it burns. Drink it all down, and then and then obviously pull out that special. You go, these are the ancient techniques that my grandfather taught me. He pulls out this like old box, like this old like fishing like bait box. What's in there? Opens it. Why is there a load of band-aids in there? Shh. Starts just applying them on Team Liquid. Next thing you know, fucking brilliant by the summer. They'll be the second best team.
But I'm actually not sure how they didn't get their TL didn't get it together before the end of the split. To get ninth is like that's like a serious fall from like grace almost. Go from first to ninth. So
maybe secretly Peter Zhang was moonlighting and coaching that team as well.
So what happened? What's going on with their coaching staff then? Because how can this whole scenario even be allowed to develop? I say this as somebody who just watched Steve at Breaking Point, so I feel like I already know the answer to this in some ways. But how can their ownership and their coaching structure be allowing like this level of lack of motivation within this team? And if so, why not just give Doublelift a break? We've seen him just take a break and stream before. There's nothing wrong with that, especially because it's not going to affect them going to Worlds at all for him to take a break in spring.
I think that's what probably should have happened. You know, it's kind of hard. You can't just the players have so much empowerment in some of these scenarios. And it's like if he's like, okay, then bench me, and if you're gonna bench him, you have to keep him on the bench actually, or else the benching doesn't really. It doesn't take.
It doesn't take.
Yeah.
Also, listen. I don't want to seem heartless or compassionless or like an overly cynical individual, but it's too late to change now. I don't know if I really want Doublelift to take a split off and then still get paid that massive fucking salary that's inhibiting my entire organization. So if you want to give up the money, Doublelift, leave it in a fucking have a Brinks truck back up to the facility, dip all that money out. You take a spring off, go to the beach. Well, not anymore, of course, but you know, watch anime, fucking play some shit Japanese game that everyone thinks is a substitute for real life now, and then come back in the summer. But that's one of the problems is like, it's all well and good us saying like, because I agree, the main problem TL obviously has is the best thing they have is they're all vets. So if you have a motivated Team Liquid, they're unbeatable in playoff settings because they're all super fucking veterans who've seen every scenario. The downside of that, and the reason why teams often try to inject rookies into teams, is like that principle where you have an aging dog and you get a new puppy because it sort of breathes a bit of life into the older dog. So it has to play with it and go around, etc. Like the problem is if you leave all the old vets to their own devices, they're going to sort of like mail it in a little bit and then chill and then try and like get it together towards the playoffs and peak. And in this kind of a setting, like, it might be better to just tell one of them, if you really aren't into it, just take them on, just take a split off. We'll bring you back next time. We'll try someone else out now.
Also, as part of the pet analogy, sometimes you just have old Yeller and you just got to take him out behind the shed, and you got to know when to do that, right? And
sometimes people never know when to take old Yeller out. See Clearloff playing for like fucking 10 years or whatever, you know. It's like...
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so they need to inject new blood somehow, whether that's the staff, and it's not like to condemn the staff or the players. It's just like it's just run its course. Like
exactly. Basically, since they can't obviously just put an S tier player in there because you know he wouldn't play for only one split. What they need to do is have a blood transfusion of some A positive blood into the team. So it'd be an A level player. He's a positive attitude. Transfusing, and then you move him afterwards. So you know, there's something there. We'll workshop that analogy. Someone write that down.
Do you? I know you just said your thoughts about Bjergsen, that he's playing like an older style of the game. I kind of feel that way when I see Jensen playing as well. I feel like these guys are not really invested or involved in the way that the game is played these days. And if I think about Broxa and how proactive Nemesis was on the map last year, it must be very difficult for Broxa to play in a system that is not encouraging that same kind of synergy that he had in Fnatic.
Yeah, I mean, from personally working with him, the sentiment is correct, I think, and they need to fix how they play jungle around their lanes. But this is also very hard if you're also going to be subbing in a new player, because Doublelift is so vocal on the. Like if he actually wants to take a break, like subbing in a new player would change the communication structure of the team entirely, because he is a major part of it. And also this, Jensen has never been the most vocal from mid early game, and then they have so many different languages on that roster, that it's gonna be difficult. But yeah.
Was the Team Liquid team like that last year then? Because that's another aspect. Yeah, like you say, you've obviously got people who naturally speak Danish, Korean, obviously you could double lift. You know, in that scenario, was it a team that didn't have to have like non-stop comms? Did people just kind of get by on minimal information? What was it like in the dynamic in that sense?
Early game, I think Smithy is a little bit better at playing around lanes without communicating that much. Where Brox, I think, needs more direct communication, and it's like almost like a flow chart of what you should be doing, which is also a problem, but it is a band-aid fix you can use. So I assume that is a problem.
Because here's the wacky thing, mate.
I'm not working on the inside of the team, so I don't know 100%, but from the outside looking in, that's how it looked from my angle.
Like, as much as people flame, obviously, the player I'm about to mention, when I actually look at the end of the split, it would have made way more sense to me if it had been fucking Broxer on TSM and Dardoch on Team Liquid. That would make way more sense in terms of like the natural playing styles they have and what they would bring to the team. Like, Dardoch seems like the kind of guy who would be super vocal and would get all this shit going.
Yeah, I mean, this comes down to roster assembly and how you view each role.
Do you think TL really wants Dardoch back? I'm just curious.
Listen, mate. Have you ever heard the old saying, beggars can't be choosers?
like
just saying.
Don't you think there's some level of reluctance to bring him back on there after
what a choice have they got? Listen, Monty, if my choice is like I have to bring back my old ex-girlfriend who used to argue all the time or chop my balls off, I think I'll try it. You know what? Maybe we can make it work. Well, give it another shot. I'll try being cooler. You try arguing less. See what's going on. That's what I'm saying. What are the alternatives? They let go of Smithy. When you let go of Smithy, you better be getting a fucking god that comes in at this position. So, like, you better have your.
I really have this question. So, why let go of Smithy? Why, when you've won so many consecutive titles, why are you fucking with this?
I mean, he also would play into the motivational problems sometimes, but that might be one of the reasons. But I think it was mainly to just get a mid jungle. More mechanical mid-jungle 2v2, but that's never being shown again because of the other problems I've already stated. Like Brox's strengths is he's mechanical, he's a hard worker, he generally is smart about the early game, but he does need some kind of like early structure to how to play out the early game to be optimal. And I'm not sure. Like he's also he's a passive communicator, and same with Jensen. So that already, you need to be a Smithy level of knowing where to be, or there needs to be some type of system fix.
So here's a different question. We're focusing on replacing the jungle. What happens if at the end of last year, they replaced Jensen with a different import?
I mean, yeah, they could have. I think that was...
I'd imagine they probably tried to, right? I think they were trying to get like a Chovy type motherfucker, right?
I mean, yeah, it's the problem that 95% of teams have, where like they either have two beta personalities in mid jungle, or they have one over aggressive guy and then like someone that doesn't blend. I think Cloud9 found the perfect balance with Niski Blabber of this. But yeah, I mean, funny enough, I worked with Blabber before he even joined C9. I worked with him when he was still in high school for 6 months.
Okay.
You could already tell he was going to be really good. He was like he's a Chinese style of jungler that happened to be born in North America. Very rare. But
because I'm with you. Like, listen, I'm about to speculate completely. Like, this is literally based on nothing. I have no inside information. But when I even heard that move, like Broxer to TL, like that, the first thing I thought with that is, that sounds like a fucking double lift suggestion if I've ever heard one. Like, get me Broxer. It's like he's just thinking of that one Lee Sin game from Season 8 Worlds. Like, he is a fucking monster. And then, like, you have to realize.
Double lift's like, this guy's mechanics are good. I can micro him by talking to him. Somewhere in Double Lift's brain is still the memory of Chowster, like, microing him. And he's like, I'm the veteran now.
Exactly.
So I can micro Broxer if he has good mechanics. Like, I'm sure that's what's going on.
You have to realize, Double Lift's the kind of guy who genuinely probably doesn't actually understand what Impact is doing. And if he had a choice, would just upgrade Impact for fucking Khan, and as a result destroy the entire team at any chance of ever winning. And then he'd upgrade for Khan, and then he'd be like, why isn't Khan playing weak side? Like, give me all the resources again. It's like, are you mentally ill? What are you talking about? This doesn't make sense, Double Lift. They can't all be mechanical monsters. There's more to the game.
Yeah, it's roster assembly is a big problem, I think, for North America in general. Like, some of these rosters, if you look at the amount of money that they're able to throw around. Yeah, they should be able to assemble way better pieces. Like I think, yeah,
Really?
Dignitas is a good
Really?
example.
You don't think Dignitas could have spent their money better?
I mean, yeah, that's just a fundamental error in judgment on player strengths. Like they sold Vulcan away. Yeah, but yeah, okay.
You know what I don't understand about these teams? So there isn't relegation anymore. Why do you have to spend $1 bazillion on these players if you're Dignitas? Because where's the value? So you have to think about it this way. Okay, so Dignitas spends a bunch of money instead of trying to train a bunch of rookies. Okay, so they get more famous players. Well, how do they make that money back?
I think it's just like systemic errors from like the general manager level at a lot of orgs. Like if the way you should view your roster is like it's a developing. You develop for a year, see which players are good, and then you can go for mega spend when you need to upgrade.
This is just like
spending. Yeah.
It's just not how I would operate these things if I, and I know people get like super hyped up by having like, oh, I just spent $30 million on this thing, so therefore what's a few million more dollars? But why not actually try and develop, like, first off, just go hire like an insane coaching staff, spend that money on them, then try and build up rookie players or players that you think have a higher upside potentially that you could bring into this roster. Because the question that I always have is, does spending 3 or 4 times as much money on your roster result in 3 or 4 times as much money that you're making? And the answer is no, it doesn't. It does not in esports do that. That thing doesn't actually happen, right? So you're just bleeding money for no reason.
I think Kayys was touching on something there, though, which I would rephrase it like this, Kayys. Basically, what you want to do in that first year or first split or whatever is you want to figure out what is the core of my team, like what are the strengths of it or whatever. And then the idea is you spend the money on the upgrades. But if you notice, the teams that spend a lot and fail are the teams that are putting together 5 players that never played together. And they're trying to, listen, like Dig was no way a super team, but it's that mentality of like, the Misfits example is the best one ever, probably. Because again, they didn't take a core. Yeah. They took like, 2 pieces, and then like theirs wasn't the proper core because the core of their team was the mid as well, like they basically didn't use the core angle. So I'm with you on that angle. It would make a lot more sense to like spend moderately, figure out like, right, I'm going to keep the mid jungle or whatever, and then if you need a sick bot lane, then spend the millions on that, because that way something's going to remain, whereas you're just throwing 5 players together in a fucking blender and hoping it works. Like, I mean, there's a lot of good players would get lost in the mix in that.
It's kind of what Origen did. Like if you look at what we did, like we figured out what core pieces were from the 2019 roster, and then we made the changes in the other roles that we thought would help us get closer to beating G2. Because like if you look at like how we performed last year, we got stomped by G2, and if you look at just like the systemic improvements in our gameplay from last year to this year, like how much closer we are, considering we aren't, disclaimer, we're not spending as much as G2 are. So it is
shocking.
So it's that's even worth like I think that's something important to know. So yeah.
By the way, listen, just before we move on, are we all just going to just be cool now at this point on, let me check what date it is. It's the 15th of April, 2020. Are we all just going to sit here while having a discussion about general managers and the way you manage teams and pretend like it's not ludicrous that G2 would make that role swap now? Like, why would you even do it? Why? You're spending $1 bazillion. So, you've got the best team ever, literally like ever from Europe.
Yep.
Dude, they'd be like a top 5 team ever in League of Legends, in my opinion.
From the West.
That's how good they are. Like I think this team's better than some teams that win Worlds. I don't give a fuck. But why would you ever make that move?
So I do understand why they did it, because it doesn't affect their Worlds performance. So you have to remember what
when they aren't able to be good enough even with a role swap back, and they won't win Worlds this year, Monty.
Yep, that is definitely definitely the
it doesn't affect Worlds qualification. How about that?
Yeah. And so here's the thing. From their perspective, they wanted to switch it up because they wanted to have more flexibility. Now, if I stop and think about the last few years of Riot Balance, well, who could have thought that Vladimir and Syndra would be played in the AD carry position in the bottom lane? So if you are trying to make yourself, if you are dedicated to this roster and you're trying to make yourself more meta-proof in the future, then diversifying the champion pools and the role pools that you have might in the future lead to more strategies. So I do understand why they did it, but it is time to switch back now.
I agree with you 100%. Like you don't have to die on your laurels. I think they're just a way more lethal team when Caps is in mid lane because he gets just more activated, I think. And it's honestly a shame that he's playing. Not a shame. That's not the right word, but
it's not great.
He has a lot less impact on the games. I feel like from AD carry for what his strengths are that he could bring to the table as a mid. That's all.
So the problem with that is, Monty, that's a brilliant theory craft, but like to actually do that, like that's the most ridiculous, like Icarus-esque, like, oh, why don't we just reach for a level of depth no one's ever had? It's like, just how about just win the world championship? Just try and win the world championship, boys. You don't have to do any of this stuff.
The other thing is that I think there is a psychological reason to do it as well, in that last year what they said was they went too hard in the spring to win MSI and their motivation dropped off. I think that as a psychological pressure release mechanism, since the expectations are lower and the expectations on themselves are lower as a result of this move, they can just mentally reset after this split and go back to it. And also, we can say it's ridiculous now because we've seen it, but we all thought it was an okay experiment at the time. And the reason why we thought that, I thought it was. But the reason why I thought that was because going back, and you look at what happened before, people thought it was crazy that you would put Perkz as AD carry in the first place, and that worked out amazingly.
You had one miracle. That's like literally like getting Lazarus when he's just being resurrected and then shooting him in the head like, go do it again. Like, what? I just raised him from the dead.
This is
like,
also
what then 2 times.
This is also what we've talked about, which is why Perkz is unfair and why Perkz is the best Western player ever. Is it's not fucking fair that he can shot call and that he's great on camera and that the fans love him and that he can play every role in the game and that he's an emotional leader for this team. He's like a player without flaws. It's fucked up. That shouldn't be allowed.
He's definitely I think he's the best player, second best player in the league. So.
His only flaw is he can't win LEC with an auto-filled AD carry.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of ingenious what he did. Like, he couldn't beat Caps for that year, and then he just...
There you go. That's my theory. Yeah. It's pretty sick. And I said, if you spin it that way, it's a fucking sick movie, isn't it? That he tricked him and enjoyed it, and let him win for a year, then role swapped him, and then was like, you know what? You're just not a very good AD carry. We're going to have to cut you, I'm afraid. And then just kick him off. That's actually genius. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely... I don't know how he sold that. I mean, I understand why they tried the rule swap, because Caps has shown internationally weakness in his communication or coordination with this jungler. Sometimes is like not at like a rookie level. Because even the 2018 Worlds, if you guys remember, whenever we played EDG, I was on Fnatic back then. He did not have the best series then, and I assume that's why they think they lost to make this swap, to get more communication, because Perkz will call more around mid. So, yeah, I think they should swap back. But I mean, or actually, they should keep it going. I think we want to have a chance in summer.
I changed my mind. Yes, I've changed my mind.
Yes, please keep Caps with AD carry.
Listen, the greatest trick Perkz ever pulled was convincing the world that Caps mid doesn't exist.
We'll be revisiting that one, I'm sure. I can't wait for their announcement about switching back. I really don't think it's going to be an issue for them to like make the swap back. Although I will say that plan has backfired a little bit, because we don't have the MSI break now, which if they were basically, the logic must have been, oh, well, it's either going to work and we're going to go to MSI and it'll be fine, or it's not going to work and we'll have a month to like practice up again and like retool our roster before we go to Worlds. Now, that's not going to happen. So the real danger now is that they're going to enter into regular season games that are really going to matter for their Worlds qualification, probably before a lot sooner than they would have preferred without that break there. So this could come and bite them in a certain way.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, and I think a lot of the teams caught up to G2 this year in terms of mid-game, because the G2 were so far ahead of everyone last year on how to play out the mid game, because that's when they changed the minion speed. So the way you have to interact with the side lanes changed. But now that every team had a year to study them, it's actually I think Fnatic are going to win for this reason. So unless you two like randomly start playing like really good again, but
Who's the major shot caller on Fnatic right now?
I don't think they have a major shot caller. I would assume when I was on there, like the way Bwipo and Hylissang play, they kind of just go in.
Yeah, it would
and
seem like that to me.
And if you don't follow, then they're just gonna die. So it's not even like who's shot calling. They're just like engaging, and you guys follow up, or we're gonna lose the game type deal. So and their balance of having aggressive players with Reckless and Nemesis, who are generally more passive, having people that just force like that is probably good. So
unless you're OG and you have Nukeduck, then it's not good.
Yeah, I won't.
Basically, playing with players like Bwipo, Hylissang, Caps, that's like playing with like if they put like indicators in the game, like a big arrow, like join the team fight now, join this team fight now. It's like, oh, it's the team fight, right? Join that one. You just know at that point in time when to go in.
It reminds me of like if you guys remember the an LPL team, I think it was Starhorn Royal. When
yes.
like they were just playing the game by pinging they're going in.
It was when they had the Koreans and Chinese who didn't speak another language. Yeah, they were. They showed they would literally ping and they would all just jump into the fight. It was amazing. They actually did it.
So
the solo queue dream.
Yeah. So that's kind of a similar style. But I don't know who's the shot caller for Fnatic.
I'd love to go back in a time machine and just throw current day Nukeduck into that Starhorn Roll Club team in the middle. He would just stand on the outside like, the fuck's going on here? Get me to a side lane. This is some bullshit.
I do wish we could have some sort of all-star tournament where we like that actually would be a really fucking cool like show match event for Riot. What happens
in other teams
if you take like all the top teams in the world like after Worlds like in December and then you just like swap one player, like what does TSM look like with Faker as like Bjergsen's in T1? That could be really fun to watch. I'd be totally down for that.
The thing is though, you'd have to tailor it WWE style to make it like a fun concept. So for example, you'd want it to be something ridiculous. Like the joke would be you would put Nemesis instead of Doinby on FPX and be like, well, you thought he was the worst man in the tournament. Go ahead, son. Give him a go. Like, go on, then. Have a go. Go on. And you obviously would put like fucking, some Bjergsen instead of like Chovy and give him Tarzan. Like, admit, if he had Tarzan, that would feel like someone who's never had a dad his entire life and finally gets a really good mentor. And he just gets that hug of that warm, manly embrace. Oh, God, finally melt into him. It'd be incredible. He wouldn't even get land, I think.
I would be super psyched to see that kind of event. This is why
actually sounds sick.
This is why I really wish Riot in the offseason would allow teams to like get together and do some of these things because for example, like when we're working on Flashpoint, like we have all these partner teams, right? And many of them own League of Legends teams. Like, so when we're working on Counter-Strike, like the same organizations own like Cloud9 and Immortals and Mad Lions over in Europe right now. So we could actually just organize something like that if we were allowed to, which we're not by Riot, and just play like team mix up with all of the partner teams. I think it would be really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean it's a good idea. I think Riot are going to have to take a serious look at the season and restructure it. Like how I think that they should do it is have one long season.
Yes.
Have Worlds and then allow third party companies to host more international, like how ESL used to do. I think the scene is significantly lacking in international cross. Like, why do we have so many regions if we're never going to play each other, except one big tournament?
So what you're saying, Kayys, is like esports had figured it out a long time ago, like a decade ago, that esports had actually just organically created a system that was super exciting, and then some sports people came in and they were like, but what if we just made sports leagues? You know what's a dying business model right now on the decline? Oh yeah, sports leagues. Let's do those.
Here's a joke for you, Monty. I remember a similar time to now where you would have people who came from a country and they were the best in their country or region, and you either never got to find out what had happened if they played someone from a totally different region, or you'd only see them play once or twice a year. It's called the first 3 years of esports. And then we actually got the money to have more tournaments, and it was awesome because then we could play all the time. We didn't have to be the best in Germany, but not know if he'd beat the guy from the USA. Now you can play him every month. You could see who the best was.
This would also solve like North America's like regional problem, because you could, in theory, practice against more
Exactly.
international teams, and that would then solve this issue. Because North America has steadily gone down since there's been less international tournaments. If you've noticed over the past 4 years, even though they're spending more money, so the logic isn't there. But
and you know, the other funny thing about this whole process has been that the original reason behind creating the LCS, which I think was legitimate at the time, was simply Riot was willing to spend more money than they could make as a marketing exercise in order to make production better and really like provide more player salaries, opportunities. And so no one, like ESL and MLG, could not have afforded that, what they were going to put on in 2013. Like, if you look at the scale that we had reached in LCS, not in 2013 because that year kind of sucked, but like by 2014 and 2015 when LCS really started to ramp up, it was not possible in America or in Europe to make money at that level of production. So it makes sense that they wanted to have a better presentation of their product, right? That makes total sense to me. And also, you have to remember that the main reason behind franchising and what they kept saying was, well, we're waiting for the ecosystem to develop. We want to make sure we have the right partner teams, that these are going to be people that we want to work on in the long term. We don't want to just franchise and have Team Marn, in there forever. So let's wait till we grow the scene, we get the investment, we get stable teams that are well capitalized, and then at that point in time, we're going to franchise. And these are the people we want as our partners. So by this logic, by the way, logically, now that we have something like Flashpoint where the team partners that they have selected as stable, and we are able to put on our own top-tier production competitions, why not allow us? It actually solves all of the problems that you had previously with the scene, was that no one else could produce as well as you could, and also you don't know which teams you actually trust. Well, now you have both of those things. So time to unlock it, guys. Let's go. I'd love to see at least some opportunity for high-quality third-party events.
By the way, one thing I should mention, because I know a lot of people in League of Legends actually won't have seen this yet, because it was mainly, we found out about it today through CSGO, but there was a report that said, it came from ESL, that said that Germany is planning or has extended their lockdown on large events until like the end of August. Now, I know about this because obviously that would affect like some CS tournaments like ESL was going to run. That in theory would be like, wasn't that pretty much the entire summer split?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that means we're going to be online again probably.
Summer split is like, I think, I'm not sure if they announced it. It starts on May 22nd, so that I presume the first half of summer is also going to be online.
Yeah. So people have to just get used to it. Like, this is just what it's going to be, I'm afraid, for now.
Yeah, I mean, Corona.
Indeed. Well, I think we're going to take a quick break here, guys, so that we can switch over to talk about LCS. Kayys, thank you very much for joining us with your expertise on the LEC section and also making fun of Team Liquid. Always a great time. We'll be back in just a few minutes with Locodoco, and we'll be chatting about everything else then. Welcome back to the 9 Summoning Insight presented by AT&T. And for our LCS section, we're bringing back Locodoco. Because
hey everyone.
It's always fun to have Loco on the show, especially when TSM loses. So, and especially when we can talk about all the coaching problems for TSM over the years. You were,
hey, Loco.
you were not one of them. You were not one of
doing?
them. You were not one of them. Don't worry.
Thank you.
How you doing, Loco? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Duncan?
You look well anyway. You look well. So,
Are you in LA or?
I am. Sadly, I would come and see you, but not allowed to. Dash it. In fact, turns out while I'm here the whole trip, not allowed to. The government doesn't allow me to. So, well, we'll never know now, will we? So that's the problem, really, isn't it?
Okay. People in relationships can see each other. It's allowed.
There you go.
They said significant others are okay.
I feel like this might be a one-way relationship. So I hate to break it to you. I do have to, since we didn't do the C9 roundup this week, I do briefly have to update you guys. I didn't have time to get it done in the normal fashion.
Right, do it in a cowboy voice.
We won't do it in the cowboy voice right now.
What? Where's the commitment to excellence? Where's the showmanship?
The showmanship is always there every week. I don't want to do it right now. Anyway, because I want to get through it quickly. So, obviously, Cloud9 League of Legends, they're going to be in the grand finals on Sunday. Watch that shit. Yeehaw. Cloud9 LoL Academy. 3-1 versus TSM Academy, and they're going to be in the finals too. So
damn, that little lady got to scooting. Keep going.
Thank you for your contributions to this. Cloud9 announced their first Valorant player, which is Thorin's favorite CSGO player, TenZ. Tell us about TenZ.
I think I only saw him play one tournament. He didn't seem that good.
Yep.
So enjoy.
So
you guys can have him. There you go.
Yeah.
Nice. So he seemed like he had some potential, but he just very, very briefly played it the level I watch.
Yeah, he's really mechanically good though, but translating that from aim maps into the server hasn't been his forte so far, let's say, but hopefully with Valorant he can make that happen. Also, CSGO, directly relevant to us, because we're at Flashpoint. They beat Gen G, but then they got knocked out of the tournament in 4th place, yesterday by Havu. So that's a bummer for them. We'll see how they do in future CSGO events, whenever those are, because we have no idea when CSGO is going to actually be happening again.
In my eye or something. Sorry. I don't know. So.
All right. So with that said, let's talk about LCS playoffs. Do we want to start with Cloud9 versus EG?
Start with an appetizer.
Really boring series.
Something light, get out the way quickly, small talk, and then we go to the main course.
It was I don't really have much to say about this series because it was just Cloud9 shitting on people again. And the one game they lost, it looked to me like they were just trying to use EG's comp that they had used in FlyQuest by using like Taliyah Pantheon and trying to go for those globals and play the side lanes, which has been something that EG has been doing recently. So I'm not sure how serious that was, let's say. And it also doesn't even really play to Cloud9's strengths, because the whole strength of Cloud9 right now is that they don't need globals to be everywhere on the map all at one time. And the way they were playing is they were trying to take team fights, but when you take team fights when your ults are globals, you usually don't have a lot of power if you're going to play in a 5v5. Like, your advantage is splitting them up or making side like lane collapses faster. So you can't just like come in and try and take a straight up fight a lot of the time. And that's what they were doing. So they just looked kind of silly.
Yeah, in the loss, it was really weird to see because it was the first team fight where I saw Cloud9 mispositioning. The Zben was on the far side from his team, and it's Licorice flanking, but they had their position swapped. So Zben got pushed out by Zoe, and Licorice wasn't flanking. So they lost that one team fight. And Bank picked up kills on Aphelios, and that was that pretty much.
I don't even remember Nisqy playing. I'm just going to check, but I don't even remember Nisqy playing Taliyah. He has a Taliyah game? Okay.
Yeah, and it fits into his playstyle because he likes getting priority in lane and moving around. And you said it wasn't very much a Cloud9 comp, but I think like the champions they're picking, Pantheon, Taliyah, even though they don't play it that much, it is still much like in their wheelhouse.
I just think it's unnecessary because they're already so fast at moving on the map and so decisive that they don't have to play these champions in order to get that advantage. That advantage is built into the way they roam off the mid lane already.
So it makes them more specialized, and then it doesn't give them the strength like you talked about. Like, they can get outscaled a lot easier.
Yeah, and they can't team fight the same way that they could otherwise. So I think they got sort of drawn into that trap. Hold on, let me see. He did play a Taliyah game versus
Guardians.
Golden Guardians.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. Well, regardless, I don't really think that was the most serious pickup in the universe. And especially because they were already up 2-0, it didn't seem like that game in particular was indicative of what they would be doing for the rest of the finals.
I do want to ask Duncan a question. What do you think of Cloud9's drafting and playoffs? Because I know that's been like a really big gripe for you in the past years.
The problem I had in the past years was always that, like I said, it was never that all the drafts were bad. It's that, I made this joke on the last episode. It's always like game 5's the one where each pulls out some like crazy fucking like next level Yu-Gi-Oh, like Naruto level fucking plan where it's like, oh, my plan was for you to think this was my plan. Well, he never plays game 5 now, does he? So the joke is the team's being able to successfully counter Reaper's one weakness is he can never be a hero. It's like they're never down by 2 points, so this motherfucker can't brick the 3-point shot that he would win the game with. He just wins by actually playing properly. So the other thing is, though, this year's team is actually, I have to say, even though I wasn't a fan of the offseason move, it is better than last year's team. Like, you can't really argue with that. Like, I mean, for example, I thought Zazel was all right last year, but Vulcan looks way better, and especially because their bot lane is way better. So at the moment, the problem is the last year's team, in theory, they could play through all the lanes, but they couldn't play through bot lane. That was some bullshit. Whoever said that. Like, they just claimed that because they didn't want to say sneaky shit. Like, so the real difference is he's got. Here's the funny thing. I guess Reaper's logic makes sense as long as you do have the best players. If you really have all the tools in the toolkit, you can get creative. You can do some fun shit. You can play the opposite side of a matchup if you want to for fun. I think last year's team, you had to be a bit more specialized.
So in the offseason, I talked a bit to Westrice, and one of his specialty is drafting, and he works really hard on it, and he was really good with that.
And he's like the assistant coach or something, right?
And he's the assistant coach.
He moved into the LCS team after running the academy team last year.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if he's actually working on the draft with Reaper, but I know that was something he was really strong in before. So that is something I would infer that.
Well, the funny thing is, when we had Licorice on the show, I think it was maybe like 2 weeks ago or something, he actually basically said, like, he sort of implied that the drafts really are just on Reaper, like, but people in the team just like do whatever, and then Reaper just decides to draft, and that's it. You just live with it. So it sounds to me like he's the coach who has the most control in LCS.
It's always been that way. I think Reaper bought respect from Jack and also his players with the continuous success. So I couldn't think of a single other coach that would have more control than Reaper.
That'll set us up nicely for our conversation later.
I don't mind you playing Licorice as like not the strong side of the map if you have that bot lane. I don't mind that. What I couldn't handle was last year when they would put like Licorice in a fucking tank. It's like, look at the line. Give me a break. Yeah. This kills me.
Yeah, those were sad days.
Because that was like global better thinking. That's like, well, these champions beat these champions. It's like, not when that person has the mouse.
I think, like, if you actually want, do you really think it's game 5s that really make Reaper bad, or is it just he outsmarts himself 1 every 5 games?
What I've always said is exactly that. It's that he basically he does drafts that was, this is obviously we're all talking about the past now, not this season. He does drafts that are just unnecessary. Like, you take some massive gamble, or you go super hard tunnel vision on one part of it, where it's like, in most of the seasons, like last season, he had one of the best teams in terms of like average level of the players across the board. So it's like, I don't know why you'd almost want to do some super hard tunnel vision draft like that if you were like some shit team like Golden Guardians that only had 2 good players. Like, that would make more sense if you only had to play through these 2 lanes.
I feel like we can make a term for this, because if it's only once every few games, then we can call it just Reaper's roulette. And if it's 1 every 6 games, there's the bullet that's in there. Is just clicking it right on his head every game.
Reaper loves skill.
Maybe it works like that with championships. Maybe you get 1 championship for every 5 years he fails.
There you go. Except the bullet is a trophy instead.
But Reaper loves like drafts and play styles that are very execution heavy. Just from the past, like knowing him, like,
yeah, sure,
almost like 9 or 8 years ago, like he's like playing that way and he's like coaching that way. And I think he always wanted to coach and draft the way he's been doing it. He just finally has players where it makes sense to do it that way.
That's actually a good way of phrasing it, because that's one of my problems as well. Is I bet, listen, what people don't know is I actually do think Reaper's a very smart guy. So I have no doubt if you sat down with him and went over the drafts I'm talking about, I bet his reasoning, he could probably make a really good case for all the moves he did. Like this was going to counter this, and later in the game that would come on. But the problem is, it's one of the main criticisms everyone throws at fucking LS, and then they turn around blindly every other year and go, it's fine that Reaper did that draft though. It's like, you're doing the same thing. Like he the burden of execution can't be higher than the level the players can meet consistently.
You have to, in order to understand that about Reaper though, you literally have to understand his playing career, right? Because remember, this is a guy who, within his own career, was able to win tournaments by microing his entire team from within the game. If you look at the original, like, SKT roster from IE that went to IEM Cologne, it was Reapered and 4 bots on his team, and by telling them literally exactly what to do in that series, we know that happened, he was able to win an entire tournament. So that's his belief structure about execution comes from the fact that he himself was able to do that within games. So his expectation is that other people should be able to do that as well. I think you can learn a lot from Reaper just by looking, because his playing career was so weird and so interesting, and the way that he was adapting and basically creating metas within the game and breaking the meta a lot of the time, famously through being one of the first players to take jungle items and start to use them in the top lane, then by role swapping himself. Remember when he went to jungle on Janair?
Oh,
He also
Jungle
played mid
GP.
as well.
Yeah, I mean, yes, jungle GP. Like, this guy has always been like trying to really be the bleeding edge and like creating new metas. And then not only that, but he is just so far, you know, in his perception, I'm sure, in advance, that he's the one who's also trying to tell the players what to do in the game. So I think it's probably hard for him when he can see how this thing can play out, that he believes the players should be able to communicate that and execute on it within the game as well, which, to Cloud9's credit, they are currently doing for the first time.
Also, I will say, this is a quality that, by the way, I actually in some ways can fuck with because I relate to it, is he's also an incredibly stubborn person by all accounts I've ever heard.
Yes.
And the problem with that, though, is I agree with that because I've always said this to people. If something genuinely doesn't make sense to you, I think it is bullshit to just go along with it because everyone else does it. Like, that's how you end up with these scenarios where it's one of the things that people always criticize, like the analysts that I'm friends with over there. It doesn't make any sense. It's a terrible argument. What they say is, oh, so you're right, and you know that this champion should be played more, but every coach in LCS doesn't do it. So what? They're all wrong, and you're right. Like, no, that's not the way it works, mate, because guess what? The second someone in the LCS makes that champion work, the same motherfuckers who weren't playing it because they thought it was bad will then decide it's good and they'll all play it. Like, they were never using a rationale for it. They're just staying with the herd because they think that's safe. But unless you understand why you do something, I don't think it is right to do that way. Like, that's one of the reasons why famously a lot of the players I like are very, people would say one-dimensional. It's not. It's that they have a philosophy on the game and no one's been able to convince them that there's a better way to play the game. So if they can make a good argument for why what they do makes sense, I can live with it. It's not the end of the world to me.
Well, it's also
better than saying, but the Koreans do it. Like, that's not a good reason to do anything.
It's also...
Go ahead.
Reaper just has, and Loco can speak to this. Reaper's personality is also, he's like a gangster dude. Like, he is, it's true, right?
He's very swaggy. I wouldn't say
Yes.
gangster. I would say swag is like my way of describing it.
But I've talked to Reaper about this. I'm like, dude, you're not even very Korean. Like, he's very like fuck you mentality, like very, very blunt, which is not normal for most people who come from Korea. I love Reaper. I think he's hilarious. Like, I love talking to him. Like, I appreciate this about him a lot. But he has a like a sort of a roughness and like a bluntness to him that is, it's I think it's pretty pronounced in any culture, but it's even more pronounced because he's Korean.
So I don't want to get too much detail into it, but that comes a little bit from his childhood where he didn't have the most like ideal, like the easiest childhood. So definitely like I mean, I lived with him, I talked with him. I do see that.
You wouldn't describe him as being like very Korean though, would you?
No. He's,
it was funny because I told him that one time.
Individualistic,
Yes.
Not in terms of like he's selfish, but he has his own ideas, and he's not like, this is the wave, go ride the wave. He's no, this is my wave. Like I want to do it this way.
For people who don't know, if you're interested, by the way, in Reaper, and you don't know his playing career, I literally wrote an article on exactly this topic. The problem is, I think I maybe wrote it when I was at one of those sites like Goal Pretend that now changed. So I'll tweet it after this episode if people want to read it. But basically, the premise of the article, the title was even Reapered One Against All or something like that. And the reason why I called it that is because if you want to have a cool narrative for his playing career, he started his playing career in Blaze, right, which at the time was a team with very good players. Almost every player at their position was one of the best in Korea. There were even champions when he played in this team. And part of the reason why they kicked him off was because he sort of did want to be the little like tyrant. He wanted to be the god emperor of the team who decided everything. And since their results didn't come, they famously didn't qualify for Worlds, they didn't want that. And they wanted to just have like another player and have the coach decide things and play the way they wanted to play. So all the other teams he was on after that was just some variant of this where he's the guy with all the power and all the control. But that meant in the Korean system, they're not going to let you do that with the best players. And they're definitely not going to let you be the bigger voice than the coach. So to do that, he had to have diminishing levels of talent over his career and eventually had to stop being a player because he just did. By the end, you remember this, Loco, he used to get offers even towards the end of his playing career to go to way bigger teams and be in bit. But the point is, he'd just been a player then. He'd just been the top player. He'd just been the shot caller. Like, he wanted to be the guy who decided the meta, how we play the game, where we play.
me and him were very similar in that regard, like my way or the highway. That's why we really didn't fit into the MIG system of like just listen to your elders, like listen to what's best for the team. And yeah, it's same thing regarding like his coaching career too. He used to coach in China, and as like a Korean coach, even like who's the coach that won Worlds with IG? Coach Kim.
Yes.
He doesn't get full control on IG, and that's one of the biggest reasons why he left IG. Because in China, like owners, way more so than North America, have a lot of say. And even when it's not owners, like there are certain figures within the team that have been there for a long time. They might be the GM, they might be like the part owner, they might be the son of the owner, a friend of the owner. They have a lot of control, and you just don't get to have your way a lot of times.
So I just dropped the link in chat to that article. It was on Esports, so you guys can look for it there. And Thorin will tweet it out also. Also, Thorin, that the art you commissioned for that piece is
fire, isn't it?
really good with him, like with the puppet master, which is exactly what we were talking about in terms of him just like being the dominant shot caller to an absurd degree. I mean, he is probably, that story that I told you about IEM Cologne is the single biggest like shot calling victory that ever happened in League of Legends in terms of one person just completely.
And in terms of the level of the teammates, the foot guy, put it this way, spoiler, none of them actually were relevant players after that ever. And he was beating like, Prime Fnatic, like all sorts of shit.
Yeah. And this, to me, Reaper is one of my favorite people ever in esports because of all the things that happened to him over his career. And like, for example, actually in right before I got banned, I was in conversations with Reaper about coming to coach Renegades, and I couldn't make him an offer fast enough. And he said, I've got this offer from Cloud9. And I was like, look, man, you're my friend. Like, I would love for you to coach my team, but I just can't guarantee that I can make you an offer right now. So I think you should take the Cloud9 offer. And he went to Cloud9 instead. But that was a very different world where if things had been different, that he would have been coaching Renegades instead. I'm glad he went that way now in retrospect. But, I've always had a close relationship with him.
So the point I didn't make, though, I should have thrown this in. The reason I brought up that article, though, is because essentially, even though this is just a meta-narrative, it's definitely not what Reaper himself was thinking or probably ever considered. I just took it as an outsider to Korea, because obviously I'd lived in Korea at the time. To me, Reaper represented, basically, that's why we brought up that he's more like a Westerner. He was like individualism, like, well, I as an individual want to express myself, and I have these brilliant ideas that I think are actually better than what everyone else is doing. But the problem is Korea is about collectivism. It's about, here are all the ideas we can agree upon, and your job is to be part of our idea, not to have your own idea that supersedes us all.
Yeah, I mean, it's very community focused. It's very like system focused. Like there's a system that will take care of us, your family, the government. So it's great in certain regards. It's not so great in certain regards. I mean, Korea dealt with the whole Rona situation better than almost any other country.
The advantage is that people actually give a fuck
to the government
and listen to the government, and
the government takes care of you back also.
The collective good is placed over the individual good, so nobody's out there just like doing their own shit like they are in America. Anyway, that's an entirely different conversation.
And a topic I have no opinions on. Next.
Do you want to talk about it?
No, definitely not.
Great. I think.
Listen, Monty, don't ever, if on a Cloud9 Twitch stream, don't ever bring up in front of me like listening to the government as a good thing, like doing what everyone else does just because they say so. That's not a philosophical debate we want to get into.
I didn't say it was a good thing. I just said it happens. Anyway, just said it happens. I am merely observing differences and not commenting my own opinions upon them.
I already saw what would happen in the future there. Went back in time to my own Brian now and deleted what I would have said. So
that's good.
I can do that now. I've got that ability.
It took years to develop that skill, but exactly. I'm glad you have it now. Anyway, let's move on. Unless you guys want to talk about some more of the C9 stuff. Does anybody actually think they're not going to win the finals?
Well, this is going to tie into our next part, isn't it? Because I want to actually ask Local this, right? My perception, and I think a lot of people's from when we've had them on the show, it's gotten a lot of fans angry, right? Because in the standings, TSM is almost, I don't even know if they have ever been the second ranked team in LCS this split. Were they ever on any week?
I think they were. They were second for a while.
Let me double check. I'll just very quickly check.
Yeah, I think
they were tied for second with FlyQuest at one point.
Yes, I remember they were tied for second at one point.
Yes, for 1 week. Oh no, for 2 weeks. Sorry, for 2 weeks over the split, TSM was second. But obviously, for the majority of the split, they weren't second because they lost too many games. So, right, the sentiment I've had seems to be shared by most people that they weren't the second best team by ranking, but they were like the unofficial second best team. Like they were the team that should have the chance to be the team that can challenge Cloud9. They have the players to challenge Cloud9. When they looked good, they looked like they could challenge Cloud9. It's just that their deficiencies held them back. Now, the problem with that logic is we were right in both regards, which is they were, as far as I can tell, the only team that would have had a chance against Cloud9, but they also were exactly the things that were holding them back that made them not the second best team. Like, guess what? The team that did lose to half the fucking league was the team I saw in the playoffs here in every series they played. So the real issue for me is it ties into the TSM issue, because as soon as TSM lost that 5th game, I mean, I can't even lie, even in the series before when they were getting challenged, I already sort of thought, shit, I think that whole, like, maybe TSM can be the team to challenge them is gone already. I don't know if they were ever the team we hoped they would be, unfortunately.
The thing about TSM is they're such a dice roll of a team. So their high highs, I mean, they actually did beat Cloud9 in the regular season. They were the first team to do so.
Yep.
But even that playstyle, I think, was flawed. And I think Cloud9 kind of trolled by picking Shen in that situation. So yes, like there is a world where TSM can beat Cloud9, but it's so rare and so inconsistent.
Not 3 out of 5 games is the problem, right?
They're just teams that are so consistently better, like FlyQuest, like EG. I think fans and even analysts to a certain degree like fall in love with the high highs and can't just be, if you average out the highs with the low, where is this team actually at? Where is this player actually at? And as an average, I think TSM's worse than FlyQuest and EG.
Yeah, this is my problem. This is what I wanted to bring up, actually. I didn't know that because obviously people think typically locals just going to defend TSM to the death. But this is the point I want to bring up is I totally get why people, like my previous thinking, are like, oh, TSM should have won this series. Oh, TSM should be the ones. It's like should is irrelevant in this case because it's not like we only saw the playoffs. The flaws that you saw that stopped them beating FlyQuest, that almost had them losing the fucking previous series, were there in the season. Like, this team is who they were in the regular split. They're not a team who was just waiting for the playoffs and we're going to be way better. So as much as, yeah, they could have won games against Cloud9, but it's actually, I think it makes actual sense that they're not playing Cloud9. Like, as much as everyone wants to hate on FlyQuest for what they're not, what they are is a better team than TSM. I'm sorry. Right now in the server, not just because of the result, they are better than TSM. They have more reliable components that you can play around all the time.
I mean, I think this series was just like a microcosm of TSM's entire season in that they would just look. I saw all the same problems over the course of this series that I saw during the season, which is that they themselves don't seem to understand their own identity and strengths. And so they will randomly switch their compositions to wildly different styles and then perform extremely, inconsistently with those looks. Like there were weeks where they were going for, this week they show up, they'd be like, it's all globals this week, guys. Here we go, all over the map. And then they'd lose and they didn't have the coordination to pull that off. When they were at their best was at the beginning when they had to just pick early game junglers and try and play aggressively around Broken Blade in the early game. And then their problem is they started, it's like, so they caught the pass. Like there's a Hail Mary and they're running down the field. They catch the pass. And instead of just running in and scoring the touchdown, they would just fumble it right before they scored the touchdown. You're like, but the problem wasn't the play. The problem was the fact that you fumbled the ball at the end of the play. So all you have to do is not fumble the ball and then you're going to score. But instead of doing that, they're like, nope, the play was the problem. And then they start like doing incredibly different shit that doesn't make any sense with the way that they were actually having success.
By the way, when they did that fucking Game 5 draft, you should make some sort of a meme where it's like, that famous, like, it's Gooby time meme where it's like the dad, like, rushing into the room and he's going to, like, beat his kid with a belt or whatever. And the kid's just like, no, please. Like, that's like me on the ground. Like, no, please, no, not Sentuani, no. Like, when that draft even ended, I knew it was over. I was already getting the memes ready to fucking post it. I just knew it was done. It was over.
It was even better because it's not just the Sejuani, which is obviously problematic. It's the fact that they're also playing that Echo. So Power of Evil was just pushing into the lane, and then Santorin's playing Olaf. He can literally just 1v1 Dardoch all day, every day. So what does he do? He just takes everything on the map. I believe I was watching this game, and I was looking at it. It was something like Santorin was like level 10, and Dardoch was level 7, because he was so farm-starved because they had no mid-pressure, and Santorin was just running into his jungle and forcing him off all his own camps. Like, this is... how the fuck are you supposed to win this game? Dardoch is the bright spot of this team. He's the one who's actually making things... come on, dude. He's the one who was actually making things happen in the early game.
Okay, so let's go back to what you said regarding TSM and their early identity around playing around top lane, keeping Dardoch an aggressive champion. So, I mean, TSM isn't stupid. They saw some of it working. And my theory on why they switched is they realized Dardoch is way too inconsistent of a player for that to be their primary style. And also playing around top lane, you talked about it earlier in the
it's
show.
horrible.
Yeah, like Alfari, you guys were talking about Alfari as like one of the best players in Europe. I didn't watch much of LEC this split, so I won't speak on that. But you guys talked about how that's not a viable style right now. Like mid and jungle playstyle is so much stronger. And with Dragons being so relevant, with Herald being so relevant, mid priority is more important
But
than
you
ever.
can only do things with the pieces you have, Loco.
They have Bjergsen and Dardoch. That's the thing.
Bjergsen
Monty,
isn't good.
even if Bjergsen isn't good, like how bad is he then? Like where do you have him in mid rankings? Is he so bad you can't play around Bjergsen anymore? Is he at that point in your opinion?
Let me think about where I would even rank him right now.
You know what? I'm going to do it, Loco. I'm going to drop the fucking A-bomb and invoke the name that sends fear into every talk show fan's hearts. If this series, I just took the nameplate Bjergsen off and put the nameplate Froggen on, and you saw that they drafted Victor 2 games in a row, you'd lose your fucking shit, mate. You'd bring out all the old narratives out the bag. You'd say, oh, this is just useless. It doesn't even do anything. Why didn't they draft it? And then, like, mate... Mm-hmm. Victor and Zillion's the champions. This is the best mid in LCS is using Zillion and Victor.
I hate it when he plays Zillion.
And then his BM5 picks Echo. Where are the meta champions? Homie, where are the meta champions? Where are they?
I'm also very, very confused on why TSM's drafting that way, and that is my biggest question for the team. You have Bjergsen and Dardoch. Why did you guys never lean into this? There were moments where Bjergsen was playing Syndra. It worked out amazing for you guys.
Of course.
When he played Irelia.
It's mad meta right now. One of the best champions he ever has used.
This should have been the TSM. Like, you're banning Syndra on both sides in this matchup. And this series, I don't want to just look at this series and be like, this is everything that's wrong with TSM. It's the collective of the split. What the fuck are you guys doing? Why are you guys leaning so heavily into this? And
where are these Kassadin bans coming from, by the way?
Oh, it's because they wanted to play Silas, and then Power Beagle played Kassadin in that one game.
Okay, right. I got you.
Kassadin into Silas is unplayable for Silas. That's why it's coming in.
Okay, but they're banning Kassadin in multiple games where they didn't pick Silas. But okay, fine. I accept it.
You talked about it with Kayys. You look at the pieces you have and you determine, hey, I have these ingredients. This is what I'm going to make. TSM had the ingredients to be a mid and jungle focused team, and they pushed away from it so much. And that's one of my biggest disappointments.
But this is the craziest thing, Loco. It's not even like that he doesn't play the champions. Think of some of the champions you can play in the meta now. Syndra, Zoe. Like, these are fucking Bjergsen champions. Literally.
I know, right? Dardoch with the Lee Sin. These are Dardoch champions too. There's this stretch where they put Dardoch on Sejuani Jarvan for like 10 game plus. I know for a fact Josh hates playing those champions. Like, Josh absolutely fucking hates playing champion that gets enabled by others. Like, he wants to be the one that wants to be enabling. Like, he wants to be strong. And he wants the team to play around him. Like, Jarvan Seju is not his like cup of tea.
Like, you know what? This will sound fucked, but I'll actually give minor props to Dardoch for that. As far as we can tell, and I haven't heard anything from behind the scenes to suggest this has happened, he hasn't had any mad blow-ups. He hasn't actually gone mental. But I tell you what, the old Dardoch would have never withstood these fucking drafts. He would have lost his shit.
You know,
the fact that he was even actually willing to give that up, it's actually a fucked up scenario, but I'll give you a quick example. It's the one reason why back in the day, sometimes people would criticize Soaz for like being shit on champions. It's because he had so much criticism saying he was selfish and that he just did what he wanted, that he thought being a good teammate was like, oh, right, I have to just do everything these fans are saying. So he would just literally just play shit that didn't even make sense. Just be like, if you tell me to play it, I'll play it. But like in that scenario, it's like, actually, if you are Bjergsen and Dardoch in this case, you almost should be a bit stubborn and be like, listen, I'm supposed to be, I play through me. I'm one of the best players on the team. Give me my champions, design the comp around me, and I'll win the game. I'm not doing it just to be nice.
But that's where they started. That's where they started the season. Was that they were throwing
Think
games
of all the
where
mad
they
early
had
game leads.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is that it was about converting those advantages. They had at one point in time they had a read on this, and for whatever reason, and we can only speculate on that reason, it went away.
I think they arrived at the conclusion we can't play early game focused comps because we're way too inconsistent in mid game. You talk about Dardoch as a high point. Go back and look at the season. There's so many team fights he's engaging he has no business doing. There's so many times where he's getting caught in mid game, and that is such a pivotal point in the game for these early game comps. You need to be able to snowball. You're going to get caught up if you keep making mistakes and like you're racing against the clock. And TSM, I think they came to the conclusion we're not good enough to consistently convert. so we can't play these early game comps. And I think
Well,
that
what was
the
the
mistake.
alternative though? Like, what do you think they're trying to
exactly. Like,
That's
And
the
their
question.
alternative
they
is,
made themselves worse by not doing it.
if he draft outscaling comps, even if he fuck up a bit in mid game, then we're gonna win later on. And then you see, well, the other teams in the
press
league.
X to doubt? Press X to doubt because they were ahead by so much gold in some of these games.
Yeah, there's so much problem, but I think ultimately I hate the identity that TSM arrived at. I don't think it makes most of the players. I'm sure people are gonna tell me, oh, Broken Blade can't play weak side, like that's his weakness. Like he can work on that, but you neuter two of your best players in Bjergsen and Dardoch to end up with like this iteration.
Yes, you're saying what I'm saying, except I don't believe Bjergsen is actually one of the top mid laners in LCS right now.
He's 4 or 5 at worst. You can't put him worse than 5.
Look, I don't even know how to respond to that, because if your argument is that you should be playing through him, my argument is that he is not the best player on this roster.
But
I think
both agree it's nearly impossible to play through top.
I think he is optimistically the third best player on this roster right now.
Play through the third best player on the roster.
Yes. Optimistically.
BB and who else is above him?
I don't even think Broken Blade is up there. I would say Kayys has actually been better in the later part of the season.
What?
He has been. He's been better in the later part of this season. He didn't start strong, but I think that he was actually doing okay in this playoff series. And
I'm shocked you say that.
All right. And as for mid laners in the LCS, let's think about this, because who is better than him? Well, Niski's definitely better. Power of Evil is definitely better.
You have to remember, Loco, like Monty does like players like fucking bang and score. He likes boring ass AD carries.
No, but the thing is, Kayys hasn't been that great. You know, Kayys on Xayah, his like go-to champion, like one of his specialty champions from last year, Xayah and Kai'Sa, he's not using his ultimates correctly. I'm shocked that you say Cody Sun outperformed Kayys in the 100 Deep series. Like Kayys has not been a shining spot for TSM. Like he doesn't get much done in lane.
I'm not saying he's great. I'm not saying he's great, Loco. I'm just saying that I think he has had more of an effect in these playoffs than Bjergsen has.
What? They don't win the 100 Deep series without Bjergsen. They could have easily won that series without Kayys. Like Bjergsen dragged TSM.
I give you that one. Yes, he did. That last game, he did. He
hard carried the last one.
He did super carry that last game. He did.
My big thing on Kayys is, so TSM, I know how they do their draft, or I'm gonna guess that I know because they do it by like priority system. So these are the priority champions, and then we're gonna pick the priority champions. They're always rotating Aphelios, Aatrox, Nautilus in the early portion of the draft when they have it up, because they deem those the strongest champions. Kayys is not good enough of an Aphelios player to be consistently prioritizing Aphelios. Like that champion, there's so many different permutations of what can happen in the game because you have so many different guns. If you look at Aphelios one trick, they do some of the craziest shit. They go through 4 guns in a team fight, and most pro players don't play Aphelios on that level. I think Zben can, I think Bang can, I think Cody Sun, Johnson can, but outside of those 4 in NA, I think it's really hard to find really good Aphelios players. And TSM and Kayys, he's not that great of an Aphelios player. Like there's moments in the Baron Pit where he has fully stacked Chakram and he's playing defensively. There's moments where people are clumped up and he's not using Infernum ult to blast open 3 people. So I'm pretty surprised you have Kayys so highly, because I think he was one of the disappointing pieces.
I don't have him so highly. I have other people of TSM even lower. Okay, I'm not trying to. At no point in time did I ever say that I thought he was one of the top 4 AD carries.
I've got a question, Loco. Here's a question for you. I'm looking up now, and it says It says here that apparently Kayys did play Ezreal this split. He played 2 games and he lost them. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't that be something that would be in Kayys' fucking champion pool?
I think that they should play more stuff like Ezreal, Varus. They should be more utility focused.
But the problem with that, Loco, is that goes against what you just said. Like, if they're basically using global meta logic, right? They're thinking these are the best champions if we can get them in whatever order.
I think that's wrong. I think they shouldn't do that in the first place.
I think that's bad. But if they are doing that, you're never going to end up on more specialized picks like that for that player, are you? Because
I'm saying what TSM does. Not saying what I think is good, but
but I'm saying that's why that's the problem, because Ezreal's never going to be number 1 on that list, is it? It's never going to be the one that in all cases you draft immediately. No, it's going to be super specialized when you're going to use it.
I get what you mean. I don't think it should be Ezreal. Maybe it can be Varus, or it can be Ezreal. It's not my favorite, but they should move away from like, hey, this is the global meta and this is what we should do. Also, like the really weird thing that I do want to talk to you guys about last year, right? When Tony was the coach of TSM, Tony doesn't like running 6-man. Tony likes running like a tight 5-man group, everyone believing each other. So when the whole Greg for Acadian thing happened, I was like, what the fuck? Like, this isn't Tony's MO. This isn't how Tony coaches. And then later on, we found out, hey, Parth pushed this. Peter has always been about enabling junglers. When he was on Echo Fox Academy coaching for Spica talks about how much he got enabled by Peter. Grig and Acadian both talk about like how good Peter was for like their mental, Acadian especially. Like Peter's like, you're not a slave to the mid laner. You should do what you think is good. Like you shouldn't be a slave to the laner. Peter's the head coach. If I understand Peter correctly, he should be putting Dardoch on more of these aggressive champions. So I'm really just fucking confused.
Peter was the accidental head coach of this team. You remember that time, Locodoco, where you accidentally ended up coaching Team Liquid?
That was not accident. That was just planned by Steve from the start. But I understand what you mean, where Peter got pushed into that role because they looked at other coaches and they couldn't get them. So the best person they had was Peter. But Peter, from what I understand of Peter, I don't understand the decision-making that's going on TSM. I just have so much questions. I don't have more information than you guys. I don't have more information than chat. I just look at what's going on and I'm like, there's something wrong.
Yes. And, I do think
Reginald did the draft based on the champions that the guides are going to do the best of this month.
I'm actually starting to rethink a lot of like TSM in general, because Thorin and I were talking about this before the show and saying like, TSM was probably the team that could challenge Cloud9 the most in the playoffs. But here's the thing. Now that I'm actually thinking about who is on this team and where they would rank up individually, in some ways I am surprised to find myself thinking they are actually somehow more than the sum of their parts.
You're buying into like the highs of TSM and not the average and not what's like actually there.
Well, of course, but the premise, Loco, is that who could, in theory, beat Cloud9?
No one. I mean, honestly, no one. And if I had to pick a team, I would pick EG over TSM.
Oh, no. I don't even think that's, like, I don't even think we've seen a ceiling from EG that even remotely makes me believe that could happen.
I think if you can't hold up in mid jungle versus Cloud9, you can't win. And this iteration of TSM cannot hold up in mid and jungle. I think EG would have a better shot in terms of holding up. I
want to go through this right now because I actually think this is an interesting exercise when it comes to TSM, going position by position. Because like I would say, Bjergsen, I would take Power of Evil and Niski above him definitely, and there's an argument to be made for him versus Jizuke because both of them have carried games in very different ways. Jizuke through, I think, more split pushing and intelligent pressure management, and Bjergsen from getting a bunch of kills and getting super fed and then just hard carrying the game in a more traditional sense. So I think those are the arguments for potential mid laners that would be better than Bjergsen. Would you put anybody else in that mix?
I agree with you, but I would put Jizuke higher. I think Jizuke's
I would put him higher as well.
Yeah, it's really close between him and Power People.
Jizuke can also side lane.
Yes, that's true.
That's not something to ignore. We're an A boys.
But would you put anyone else from any other teams above?
Who did you have on the list? Power of Evil, Jizuke,
Niski.
Was that it?
Yeah.
And then that's where beer comes from.
Everyone else, you can't really. I don't think you can put anyone else.
But I want to do this for the other players as well because I think this actually tempers my expectations of TSM somewhat now that I'm actually considering it. Because for top lane, I would put Licorice someday.
And then you get Broken Blade.
And then you get Broken Blade. It's
what I would be pretty high up.
And here's the thing. I think if we had seen more Solo, we might also put Solo potentially above him.
I think Broken Blade's a better carry, but he can't play weak side. That's kind of the problem with him. Like, he's very defined as a player. He's really good at what he does, but pretty bad about other things.
Haunter has to be up there as well.
Yeah, I think Haunter might be a good shout for sure. Like, but the fact is like, is there? The question that I have is there?
There's no superstar player.
Is there even any player on C9 that we would say is top 3? I don't think so.
Isn't?
Yeah,
you just said is. You meant isn't, right?
No. Like, is top 3, right? Except for Broken Blade, I guess.
You said C9 instead of TSM.
Oh, sorry, TSM. Sorry. That's what I'm saying. So, like, with TSM, this is why I'm saying it tempers my expectations, because is there a player outside of Broken Blade that we would say is top 3 at their position in LCS?
Give me 20 seconds. Let me get the door real quick. I don't think my roommates are home.
All right. Right. While he's gone, I'll just make this point then. Right. What I would say is this. My problem is that's exactly because I don't think that the team was very well coached, combined with, I actually would speculate the players in TSM all 5 of them don't agree on the way that the game should be played and how each of them should play the game. I would guess this was some sort of a fucked up compromise scenario between the players and between the coaching staff, that this is just the best working system they came up with at the end. Because I actually think this is an example of a team that was probably inhibited by those factors, and hence almost all the players had worse individual performance. I would even contrast this with the example of Fnatic, where 4 of the 5 players in Fnatic now were in Fnatic last year, but how many of them looked as good? I would say only Hylissang and Reckless, maybe. I'd say the bot lane only, basically. Everyone else in the team, I think, looks better now because Whipple's way better. Obviously, the jungle position's way better. Like, that one position really was bottlenecking the entire team. So in the same sense as that bottlenecked the whole team, something in TSM bottlenecks the other players, in my opinion. Because, like, in theory, these players, you could make it. This team on paper should be the second best team. Like, Broken Blade's one of the best top laners. Bergson should be one of the best mid laners. Kobe, I think, is even in the right position. For me, Kobe is supposed to be like the third carry. Like, you just use him as an AD carry. He doesn't have to be forced through. And then he wins a team fight if he has the items and the champion to get there. Brilliant. Stable player. He's like a Reckless light, isn't he? And then fucking every other player's good. And then the jungler and thieves should have mad agency. The problem is they don't play like that in the game.
Mm. Yeah.
I also wonder if Biofrost is sort of a stylistic
doesn't seem like the right person to go with Kobe, because again, they both seem like they're more like passive mentality players.
There's 2 ways you can go about that. Like, if you have a player like Kobe, one of the advantages that gives you is it unlocks your support to go play other places on the map. Sure. And the synergy between Dardoch and Biofrost has not been great.
Yeah. Here's who you would want on this team. I'd rather have Ignar in this team.
100%. 100%.
He's so much better. I think he's one of the best.
It would be an antidote
right
this, like in the same
Ignar
way
and Vulcan are definitely the top 2 supporters.
That would be one of the things that would unlock all the players on the team. It wouldn't hurt Kobe either, because let's look how he plays.
And I think just having a clear identity on the team would have made things
basically, when you were out, Loco, I just suggested that I contrasted it with Fnatic this year to last year, because obviously they have 4 of the 5 same players, but having self-made instead of Broxer makes the whole team look way better. So in the same sense, I think this team, something inhibits each of the individual players. That's why I don't disagree with Monty. There is no like MVP player of the league on this team, but they should all be better. Like, I feel like they should. Even the composition looked like it made sense, but that only makes sense if it's me who's making the team, because I would tell you this is how you're going to play. If the players don't agree with each other and the coaching staff doesn't agree with how this team would be set up, then yeah, you could end up with a team like this.
I think it's a mystery of TSM. You know how we talked about all these players, like where they rank, but preseason, would we have ranked them that way? Preseason, would we have Bjergsen at like 4 or 5?
No. That's what I'm saying. They should be better.
After Kabe's Worlds performance, where he was the only thing that looked good on Splice, like, no, we wouldn't have put him there.
Something's wrong. And we're talking about player replacements, right? I think even if he got the right player, would it like really solve or like fix TSM? Like, that's my question. Like, from what's going on, I think there's something wrong internally. They're not getting the best out of their players.
Why doesn't Parth want to coach the team anymore?
I don't think
doesn't want to have to kick himself after a year.
Parth never wanted to be head coach, from like how I understand Parth. Like, he doesn't like the spotlight.
He sure loves interfering though. Why does he keep saying that line? I was never supposed to be a coach. That's like that fucking Super Hot Fire. Like, I'm not a rapper. Like, why are you rapping? I don't know why I'm now reacting to like a boomer to fucking old memes. Like, what? Stop rapping, Super Hot Fire. Like.
I really don't know. Like, I spent about like a year with Parth, maybe less than a year. He never had like ambitions to coach, and he's not like saying it in like a maniacal way or like with bad intentions. Like, he just never really did want to coach. Like, he wanted to contribute to the team. He tried to look for places he best contributed. I think general manager is like a good role for him, but yeah, like there's times where he's stepping in where I feel like he shouldn't.
I'm going to say something that might upset people, but I've already said it on Twitter, so why not? Here's the problem.
Shocking you.
I won't say who it is because I haven't asked their permission or whatever, but I met with someone who had decision-making power in TSM in the off season. I met up with them. I had like a dinner with them and talked to them. And all they wanted to do was just pick my brain a bit, just ask what I think, how I think about the team, what's going on with it. You know, it was a mixture of like social and then a little bit of professional discussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the discussion, part of it was, you know, off season rumors. Oh, who have you heard's going here? Who's going there? You know, some of it was LCS, some of it was the LEC. And when we were having these discussions was when, you know, things were happening, like maybe Smithy was going to be on TSM, you know, Dardock, or would you have him again if you got the chance? We were having all sorts of interesting discussions that, you know, just chopping it up, basically, having a coffee. But one of the things I told them at the time, and this is, remember, think of the timing of this. This is before off-season ended. This is when everything was still possible. All the moves were on the table. Very few players were actually signed. I told them at the time, as inside information, I was told that there is zero chance Youngbuck would be returning the next year, and that he not only wouldn't be returning, but it's not like, you know, another top team in Europe. It wasn't going to get a job offer from OG or G2. He was going to have to go to a team like he's in now, either like a low-level LEC or a low-level LCS team. And I told them, listen, I wouldn't normally speak out on coaches because it's so hard to know what they do. But this is a rare example of a coach where I've heard from a lot of the players under him and been able to have a lot of discussions to find out some of the sense of what their strengths are. And I told him, literally, this person from TSM, to their face, if you wanted him, I guarantee Youngbuck would join your team. And he is literally the player you need. Because all of those problems that everyone has as big narrative memes, like PX is too passive, you fuck up all the junglers. I said, this guy, that is his one specialty. He is the fucking Band-Aid guy who figures out people's flaws, but how to still make them work together. So when I look now at the problems they had in TSM, and I look at the roster they had, I think, imagine if they'd have had Youngbuck as their coach. Like, I think no joke, I think he would have actually fixed this thing. I know that's obviously mad speculation. It's completely hypothetical, but that's the sort of coach that I think would have been awesome for this team.
Youngbuck is also a coach who is very good at dealing with players' emotions. It actually does have a leadership quality about him as well that most people...
He's kind of your captain if you have him as a coach, basically. He can do that role as well.
Yeah. I know people like gameplay coaches, and like that's what they think is important. Like, get LS, like he's super smart about the game. Get this person, like he's challenger. I've seen his VOD reviews. Like, TSM doesn't need a gameplay coach. Like, they need someone with base gameplay understanding, but I don't think that's like their core need right now or their core problems.
Plus, they have assistant coach. I mean, Lustboy's still there, everybody like that, to actually develop the strategy. I don't know. I think this whole thing is... This whole like TSM coaching job is just crazy because it's like the Harry Potter like Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Except it would be like that, except if Dumbledore was just an asshole who would like come into your class and like try and teach it when your grades your students' grades started to slip a little bit like that. I just don't get how this organization has gone through so many coaches, including so many coaches who later went on to head coach at other places. Has there ever been an organization in LCS who has had so many coaches that are still coaching for other teams? You're one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Song is the head coach of CLG right now. Zix is the head coach of 100 Thieves.
Yeah.
Kane.
I don't know. Well, other than Youngbuck, do you have a solution, Monty?
I think Youngbuck, like, look at the coaches that were available. If Youngbuck was available, to me, that's crazy that they wouldn't look at him.
Like, there's others who passed as well, but
what about Yamato Cannon?
Their example wasn't as ridiculous as TSM's, because what TSM ended up with, like, again, this is the problem, Loco, with when you know things that other people don't know, is we're all supposed to just lie and keep pretending that Dardock was the first choice jungler and Peter Zhang was the first choice coach. Fuck off. It's not even vaguely the case. These were the last choice people.
Well, I love how, like, Jacob Whoop said TSM looked at Xmithy. Like, he said it in an article.
Yeah, that's what I love, dude, because then we can at least use that as like official things to speculate from.
The TSM fans are fucking crazy.
Sadly, no one knows the coach one because no one ever reported that, so we can't even mention that. But put it this way, it wasn't fucking Peter Zhang, I can tell you that. That's why Monty gave the analogy to you and TL, because you're already in the org, and then it made an obvious choice to, right, we'll go with him if we can't go with the other person. So Peter Zhang's already in the org, he's the academy coach, so they just used him. It's obviously not the first choice, though, is it? So isn't that an area you can look at to potentially upgrade?
Coaching role right now.
Maybe you can't in the middle of the season.
Yeah. And switching coaches in the middle of the season is really hard, too, because, like, in a sense, like, you're behind because, like, you're developing a system, right? Like, that's what a good coach does. Sure. They make a system to get the most out of their players, and you're starting from scratch in, like, middle of the year. So you have it'll be rough. I don't know. I don't think they can really fix a lot for summer. I would rather have them like double down on the pieces they have and actually just find a better identity for the team.
How are they going to do that?
Play around mid and jungle. Just actually play around mid and jungle. Like, and if anything, if Dardoch is that inconsistent, look for a replacement in jungler. Let's talk about that. Like, how did you guys think about Dardoch on TSM? I know me and you, Doran, like we talked about this so much before. Dardoch would never join TSM. Even if he joined TSM, there would be problems. If he joined TSM, it would fix both Dardoch and it would both fix TSM. Like, what's your point of view after we got to see what Dardoch with TSM looks like?
The problem is Dardoch is still a good player. Like I'm not willing. I wouldn't just give up on him if I was TSM, for example. Like because again, who are you getting instead? That's the question, right? There's not that many players you can put in.
There's no upgrade they can make.
But I will say that's also the reason why when that was the rumor in the offseason that they were getting Nick Smithy, I even thought that's a fucking good move. Like this guy, you're not going to have to coach him as to how to play the jungle. He already has that down. Whereas the problem with Dardoch is like, I feel as though, again, I'm speculating here, you have to put pieces around him that would just work with him naturally. Like, I don't think he's going to make a great job of artificially creating like relationships, communication structures. You're going to need people who just would play off him well. Now, what's funny is I would guess Broken Blade should be a player that would fit him great. Like, if you just spent the last season with all the nightmare jungle problems and you get Dardoch, I'd be loving it if I was a top laner. I don't really understand why there's a disconnect between him and Bjergsen, because that was one where if Bjergsen doesn't ruin the junglers, then surely Bjergsen should love having a player like Dardoch with the skills that he has in his toolkit.
And Dardoch should love Bjergsen. Like, he always talks about how much he respects Bjergsen. He talks about how he wants a communicative mid laner, like he wants strong player. Bjergsen and Dardoch supposedly are the perfect fit, and they aren't. Like, oh my God, I cannot wait until more information comes out on this.
I will say, though, I do think Dardoch at sometimes did have champion pool issues. Like, there's certain champions, it's almost even like a meme. Like, if you just pick champions you can be mad aggressive and put pressure on early, give Dardoch all of them. He'll be great with them. He'll definitely get gold leads, kills, pressure. If you pick the ones that are like the kind of champions that Smithy would play, then it's probably going to go badly for Dardoch. And those are most of the losses for me, like fucking
but here's
Sejuani, all that shit.
Here's the thing: is that one of the things that's always been true about jungle balance in League of Legends is that it's basically those aggressive options have always been there. So there's no reason to believe that there would be a scenario in which he couldn't play aggressive options. Like, Lee Sin has been one of the most competitive played champions of all time. Has
that ever not been in the meta?
Yes, it was very briefly when they nerfed him a bunch, but for the most part, it's like 90% of League of Legends competitive history, Lee Sin has been a viable option in the jungle. And that's been true of Elise for the most part as well. Since her release, it's been true of Olaf. But my point is, you always have some aggressive option, like whether it's been Vi, who obviously is not in the meta right now, but there hasn't been a period where you couldn't play aggressive junglers of some sort or another. So my point is that when you're GMing a team, that is one of the essential truths of League of Legends that you can design a team around.
Evergreen champions, yeah.
I've got a question for both of you, right? Listen, I know in LCS, they think it's a fucking top lane champion. Why wasn't Dardoch on fucking Set more?
He played a few games of Set.
Shouldn't he be a stud on that champion?
Yeah, Set is a really strong champion. The problem with Set is like you just don't get him that much because people ban him or he's first picked a lot.
Or your top laner wants to play him.
He never gets him though.
Yeah. He played one game, and then other than that, he mostly went to Broken Blade. But I'm repeating some of my points, but Dardoch on early game, they tried it. They didn't like it. They moved on. I feel like.
Well, how do they like what they've got now?
I don't know.
That's wwhy I don't get why people always love to do that option of like, oh, but this thing here isn't perfect. I agree. So let's try this thing that's shit. Whoa. Like, that thing wasn't perfect, but it was good. Yeah, but it's not perfect, though, is it? So the other thing, well, why would I do that? That's shit.
Dude, it's really hard to have that voice, right, Doran? Like, things are going wrong around you, and then you have to be like, the thing that's not going well for us right now is going to go well for us in the future.
Yeah, you have to not be results-based,
Like, you have the pressure on being on TSM, like, you have the pressure of being that new coach, the coach that wasn't supposed to be the coach. And then even from Dardoch's point of view, right, he's like the kid that got, like, kicked around, and then now he's, like, on the team, and then he wants to be like, I want to continue playing early game. I know I'm throwing, but I want to continue playing this way. Like, it's so
Dardoch's basically on his like fourth foster home. So now even when like someone's like spills a drink on him, he's like, fuck it. No, that's fine. It's fine. I'm all right with that.
Honestly, inside, he's just that's what it seems like. Like, gun to my head, if you ask me, do you think Dardoch likes playing Sejuani Jarvan? Of course fucking not. Like, Oh, this is such a mess.
I mean, I don't know. I agree with you're talking about the building around top lane right now, because we don't see really any teams in the world who are able to win consistently or be a title, even a regional title winning team based around top lane strength. I don't think that's true anywhere right now.
Oh well.
I mean, FPX is on a big win streak, right? Maybe, but even then, I don't think that Khan was the right move.
That was a terrible move. That's what I love, though. Because here's what I've always said this, Monty. The worst thing about League of Legends is that even though every single discussion about a specific game in League of Legends is literally mired in the meta and can't get out of the meta, every discussion about players' careers acts as though a meta didn't exist and you were all playing chess, an identical game for 8 years. Like, as a result, when someone wins Worlds, everyone in the entire scene collectively hypnotizes themselves that they always were the best team, they always had the best playing style, and what they did was exactly correct, and they made decisions to do that. When I look at that team, I don't think they sat down, like, there wasn't some genius GM who sat down and constructed that team. And so as a result, first of all, it probably wouldn't have worked this year. And secondly, them recruiting Khan tells you that whoever recruited Khan fundamentally didn't understand why they won
I think
Worlds.
that was such a bad move.
You know, it's crazy, isn't it?
But
Like them recruiting Khan would be like, let me think of a good comparison. Well, the best example ever, it's Broxer instead of Xmithy. You were like, Broxer, because think about it, in both cases, Khan and Broxer are what the other two players will never be. Well, yeah, but hold on, boss. What were the other guys? Never mind. That means they're better. And then you put them in, and then they don't have what the other guy brought to the team, and the team collapses.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what you have until you lose it, right, Thorin?
I've been all right. How are you doing?
We talked enough about TSM. I haven't gotten to talk with you guys in a while. Let's talk about Team Liquid and their season. Like, what was your, like, I guess, yeah, what did you guys say when they failed to make playoffs?
I mean, I just was like, well, there's the one team that could potentially beat C9 besides
That was the
TSM.
other one. Yeah, exactly.
Like,
there was two
the thing
conditions.
is,
It was TSM get their shit together, and Team Liquid make the playoffs, and sadly neither happened.
Yeah, like as soon as C9 eliminated them from the playoffs, it prevented that miracle run, like things actually coming together and them getting motivated and actually challenging for something. Now that TSM just like shit the bed versus FlyQuest, I just don't see anyone beating. I'm shocked you say that you think EG has a better shot at beating C9 than TSM does.
Of course, dude. What's your love for TSM? Like, this team is not good. They're so inconsistent. They throw away too much. They don't know how to close out games.
Again, it's about the ceiling that I've seen from TSM, which is,
my
yes,
God.
I totally agree with you. And I'm not saying I think it's likely. I'm just saying the possibility existed for TSM in a theoretical universe to beat C9. I think you could bring Doctor Strange in this motherfucker right now, and he would see no realities where EG wins.
I think there's more realities where EG wins than there is a TSM wins. So that's coming from like a TSM.
Why would EG win against C9?
Because they have the strongest mid and jungle outside of C9.
Okay.
I think that gives them the best shot. Like, if you can't win mid and jungle right now, it is so hard to win the game. So I think all the three teams right now that are still competing have the three best mid and jungle. Centaur, Pirate Beeble, GZK, Svenskeren, and Nifty Blabber. Those are the best three mid and jungle duos. And
is it not an issue for you that even if, like, first, when you say win, you mean win hard through mid and jungle? Like, if you just slightly win mid and jungle, isn't top lane alone going to be a liability?
And that's going to be a liability, yes. But it's like we're choosing the best of like shitty situations, right? And I think EG is the more favorable situation for me than TSM is.
It's also why
what in your world does an EG win look like?
What an EG win? Jizuke and Svenskeren are actually able to build a lead. They win dragon fights, and Bang gets farm. Bang gets enough farm where he can be relevant later, and EG can start matching up. And hopefully Kumo's in a good enough matchup where he doesn't get like booty blasted. But luckily, one thing that's a little, we can't even call, I don't even think we can really call it a weakness.
Literally every player on an individual level on EG is worse than the C9 players. And they also have worse synergy.
And we can say the same thing about TSM though, Monty.
No,
Monty, we can say
no, because at least there's a higher ceiling on some of these TSM players.
I don't
Listen,
think.
I don't want to. Listen, people can call me a hater all they want, but I don't think it's impossible that in a 5-game series, Jizuki could outperform Niski. I don't think that's impossible. Niski might work better with his jungler, but as an individual mid laner, Jizuki could have 3 pop-off games. He even plays the champions to do it.
What if this?
I would argue the same thing about Bjergsen, though, right?
I mean, I know why people say that because he's been so consistent over the years, but I do think this split, he had some really ropey moments.
Man, I have to.
That one week where he just did fucking nothing the whole week. I'd have to find out which one it was. I think it was the week he went 0. Don't quite say the week he went 0-2. We'd have to fucking narrow that down, wouldn't I? Let me have a look which one it was that I'm referring to.
But Monty brought me on the show to argue against TSM. Like, what the hell? But I legitimately, honestly speaking, like, yes, there is like highs of TSM, but that high is so rare. And also,
I
like,
agree. You realize we 100% agree about this. All we are arguing about, we're not arguing about that, Loco. I know you're having problems about what we're actually arguing about. My argument is not that. I totally agree with you. It's that 1% chance that TSM does really well is still better than EG's odds.
Right, Loco, I found
EG won the game against TSM also, or not TSM, excuse me, Cloud9 also.
Yes, like because Cloud9 was doing some stupid bullshit, and you know
they did that versus the TSM game. They picked Shen. Like, oh my god.
Okay. To be fair though, it was elimination point. Like C9 had already gone 2-0. Here's all is this, right? I found the week I was referring to. Right, my problem is this. Is everyone else who's a TSM fan has deleted week 6 from their mind. Here's what happened in week 6. Team Liquid had Broxer and they actually beat Team TSM. Bjergsen played Maokai. Now, after that, they played CLG, one of the worst teams in the league, who had Pobelter just coming in. And Bjergsen played Zoe, one of Bjergsen's better champions in the last few years. And he got 0 kills and died twice. Like, this 1 week is burned into my brain. Like, I can't forget that Bjergsen can turn up as well. That was always a possibility. So I do think personally you should have put the whole game on his back. Like, he's the only player I think you could actually play through in terms of the lane, but it also could have failed. I'm not saying they necessarily would have won. I just think they would have had a better chance.
Look, if your argument is EG routinely plays at a higher level than TSM, I 100% agree with you. However, I just don't think they have the capacity to win a final against C9. Whereas I would rather take that. If you made me pick a team that could possibly beat C9. So we could have a final where there are more close games against C9 with EG.
Okay, then let me ask you this question. If EG and C9 played 100 games, how many games would EG win? If TSM and C9 played 100 games, how many games would TSM win? I think EG would win more games than TSM does. So, like, by that logic, EG has a better shot.
No, I don't think so.
Really? You think if TSM played 100 games at Cloud9, TSM would win more games than EG
again,
does?
we keep going back to this. It's the same argument that I keep presenting to you, which is that EG would play more close games, but they would win fewer games.
Okay. I think
TSM would get blown the fuck out more, but they would also, I think, win a few more games.
The logic is this. Here's the logic, Loco. The problem is, like, the simplest way to explain it would be this. The games that TSM did win, they would get mega ahead early. They would, in these ones, because we're playing 100 games, you know, like obviously they would throw fucking tons of them, but some of them they'd close. And let's say they close 20 of them. That means they win 20 games. The problem with EG is maybe they'd be in 60 of the games and then just lose, like, you know, fucking 58 of those, and then their wins would be like 12 or something, you know, or 10, you know. So it's basically the logic of Korea versus the West. It's like in Korea, if you're the second best team, you often just lose to the best team in a way that makes perfect sense for both teams. At the end of the game, you shake their hand and go, "Wish I was as good as you." In the West, what you do is you do some ridiculous vitality shit where you're like, "I'm just going to fuck the whole game up," but maybe in doing so, by not playing League of Legends, I can win whatever this broken dog shit game I'm pretending the game is, and then you just win off some mad miracle. And TSM would have a better chance of doing the variance angle, I think.
I think we both understand each other. We just disagree.
And here's the other factor to consider.
Yeah, that's our relationship.
Yeah, exactly. In this scenario, actually, Thorin, what's your opinion on this?
Well, the problem is I'm in the unlucky position of both loving that Bjergsen isn't as good as people made him out to be, but also agreeing that I think they should have played through him because I don't think the way they played actually could have won them the game. So I'm also low-key, like, I'm not a copy hater. It's like I say, I think he's just reckless light. Like, I think he's a good enough player, but I don't want him to be ever.
Not about TSM, but like who, because we talked about this. You think the TSM had a better chance to win the finals, right?
Yeah, but that's also because I think my philosophy generally on like I say, I always view it from a stylistic angle, and I think stylistically, I don't really know how EG's style could win many games against Cloud9. Whereas even though TSM is actually a way more flawed team than EG, that style that they play is high variance, and so as a result, I think when it would work, you would close more games because you'd be so far. But this way, it's never good in League of Legends, no matter how good you are, to be behind in the game.
Look,
so the idea that EG is going to be ahead of C9 3 out of 5, I don't know how.
And here's the fun thing too. I would rather be EG than TSM.
Of course. Yeah. It's like this. The analogy basically is like this. Would you rather be like fucking Karl Malone, who was like one of the best players of all time, but only ever finished second in the finals? Or would you rather be someone who had a very brief career, but fluked a championship? Now, a fan would say the championship. But if you're actually a player, most people would rather be the Hall of Fame who had an amazing career because you were amazing all those games. You know what? Even if you lost, it was by that much. And, it's like objectively, the player who didn't win was actually better.
And the other factor is, as we're talking about these teams, TSM, C9, and EG, the worst player on all these teams is Kumo.
Kumo is like bad, but he's functional. And also, he's playing one of the least important roles.
That's true. But you see how lucky they are that that's true. Like, imagine if top lane wasn't the shittiest role in the game right now.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be terrible.
That's the thing,
we're living in this reality where...
No, here's the thing, though. That doesn't work, though, Monty, because that is always one of my criticisms of Reaper is this motherfucker, it doesn't matter how many edges Licorice would have in a top lane matchup. He'll never draft all the time for top. I mean, listen, now it doesn't make as much sense, but there was times when he could have and he didn't. Like, the amount of times that guy ended... Like, if anyone out there hates when Bjergsen, you're like, oh, my God, it's the big game. Bjergsen has to carry us, boys. What's he going to lock in? Zillion. Oh, I'm dying inside. That's how I felt every time, like, the fucking Gnar came in for Licorice or the fucking Maokai or any of them. Like, when he locks that in. So I wouldn't actually trust Reaper to draft through top in that scenario. So I actually think the team they have now in the meta now is probably the best case scenario.
That's true. I can agree with that also. But I think EG, like, where we talked about TSM's players and where they rank up right now. We talked about Jizuke. Svenskar is certainly one of the better junglers in the league.
Mm-hmm.
How high are you on Bang right now? Because it sounds like you really like Bang, Loco.
I think the meta is really good for Bang. All these like utility AD carries being played, Senna, Philios, Kalista.
Philios seems custom made for Bang if you think about his skill set.
And also EG's just doing so much better of getting the best out of Bang, right? They're not putting pressure on him early.
They're getting the most bang for their buck, I think would have been the obvious joke there, Loco.
But they are. They're doing what 100 Thieves didn't. Like, Bang needed to win early game on 100 Thieves because their mid lane was...
To be fair, he did have the dead corpse of fucking Aframu, like fucking handcuffed to his ankle that he was dragging on like a police chase away. So, like, I'll give him a little bit of breathing space on that one.
I think Bang's actually number 2. I'm trying to think who
I think I could see it.
Yeah, it's Ziben, Bang, and then who's number 3? Like Johnson or Cody. So yeah,
that's
I mean, I like Bang.
That's
but
actually
I like
super depressing to think about.
Oh, Eddie carries dog shit in it. It's actually whack as fuck.
It's so bad.
In it.
That's where we are. Double's not really relevant right now. I mean, he will be relevant in summer, hopefully, but Double just dropped off the face of the earth.
I mean, what's sad is right after the names you've mentioned, it's probably Cody's son. Probably has to be. I actually do think, though, you know what? This is a total side conversation. It has nothing to do with the playoffs because they're eliminated now. As the years have gone on, I don't know if it's Cody. Actually, you know him a little bit, Loco, so you give me your thoughts on this. Mm-hmm. Has Cody's son himself radically changed? Because I actually don't feel like he is the same player. We know the first time he was on 100 Thieves, I did think he should be kicked. I wrote a whole column on it. Like, I thought he was the biggest liability. Now I feel like he's like one of the best things about that team. Like, he gives you a chance to win the game.
Yeah, so Cody, when he was younger, like, was really bratty from what I heard from the Immortals people. He just demanded a lot. He thought of himself in a certain way, and then 100 Thieves, and then getting bounced around, and then on Clutch, like rebuilding himself with Balkan, and then joining 100 Thieves again. I think his mental got a lot better. Failure teaches you a lot, and yeah, I mean, Cody learned.
Well, that probably impresses you, right? It took your life career cycle, and he just did it in like 2 years. It took you 10 years.
Maybe. I mean, but if you get spoiled as much as I did, then
Okay.
I think Cody's much better of a player. I think he's way more responsible, and from what I heard, he's a way better teammate.
Let's talk about FlyQuest, because
if we must.
I know exactly. That's how I feel too. It's like,
dude,
yeah,
come on, they rest
like,
themselves. They used to be the Snickers team, and then now they have their whole tree questing. They're actually relevant as a team. They've been better.
Yeah.
Oh, no, what's great is FlyQuest is the opposite of TSM. Every time I look at the roster, I'm like, that shouldn't be that good a team. And then you watch them and you go, actually, it's way better than most of these fucking teams in LCS. So, like, this is what's funny. In the same way as Bjergsen will never, by the way, I can tell you now if you're here, TSM here, give up on this. You'll never break them that he's actually not as good as they think he is. They still think he's always one hair from fake at his prime. They always do. They always will. And if he isn't, it's the jungler's fault. It's the coach's fault. It's everyone's fault except his. I mean, now, if you actually explain to them that he himself doesn't see himself that way, then they just blame his own fucking ego or something. Like, you can't win against people who are Bjergsen fans. But in the same sense, Power of Evil can somehow never shed this. He can never shed this narrative that he's like some below average mid laner. Like, as far as I can tell, his whole career, he's at worst been average for the leagues he's in. Most of the time, I think always above average. Because he has such a set playing style that unless you can appreciate, if you only want to see the meta champions, you hate him. If you like what he does, he always brings value.
He actually has a really big champion pool. I mean, I think Power of Evil is a very interesting player. He's incredibly consistent. And I think, like, he's just a rock. Like, he's the kind of player that can really serve as a foundation of a team overall.
Yeah. That is a cool factor.
He's frogging, but better.
No, just German. And on a good team.
I do think Power of Evil is really good. And one thing that Power of Evil doesn't do is he doesn't control his own narrative. Like, he doesn't really, like, he's not very flashy in interviews, and like, he doesn't stream that much. He doesn't tweet that much. He's a damn good player, but I mean, the narrative is usually controlled by like the player speaking up or like the analyst or the casters doing it. And yeah, Power of Evil was just really quiet, and people don't vouch for him as much as some of the other players.
I also think he's like, one of my favorite things about Power of Evil is that I think he's really creative in the way he plays out certain situations. Like, his sort of moment to moment decision making is really quite impressive.
There's actually a piece of trivia for that might interest you that I saw someone post, I forget where, after like one of the shows we did where we referenced Power of Evil. Someone said that apparently the reason he has all these, like in his arsenal, he has all these weird builds and counter picks, is that apparently he used to be like a 3v3 player. And so his whole mentality for the game came from how the game would work 3v3 instead of like a proper 5v5 game. And so his vision for how the mid lane worked was different. That's actually quite an interesting angle if you consider how he plays in the game now.
Yeah, and I also think, like, you know, yes, is he primarily a control mage player? Yes. I mean, that's kind of his bread and butter.
It's not a sin. I don't know why that's a sin, though.
It's
why
not.
Is that a
it's
sin?
not. It's not. It's actually, again, this is like what we were talking about the jungle. Just like there's always aggressive champions in the jungle, you could always play control mages in the mid lane.
Of course.
There's never been a scenario. There's never been a meta. Like, show me the meta where like Oriana doesn't exist.
So there was a meta where Akali, Irelia were the two most picked champions, and you needed to play them, and Power of Evil was not great on both. Like, so that was like the meta where he did suffer. That was just last year.
I'm not always saying they're the best, but I'm saying, Loco, that it's always a way to play the game of League of Legends.
It is a way, but sometimes it's just not like I would say almost non-viable way. You can do it, but like you're
let me contrast it. Let me contrast this for you. It is less of a force to play control mages in all points of League of Legends history than it is to play carry top laners when you're a carry top laner. There have been metas where you just can't fucking do that.
Yeah. Okay.
That is never true of early game junglers, and it is never true of control mages.
Yep, there's definitely evergreen champions in the meta that will always get play. Oriana, Thresh, Lee Sin. I agree with you.
So that's the point I'm making, is like, he is in many ways, even if he's not the flashiest player, he is like a bedrock player, and I really appreciate that about him.
Yeah, here's the thing. Here's the difference as well, is it's actually, in my opinion, a waste of time to discuss, like, should I have Power Evil or Bjergsen or someone, pick whatever mid laner you want, whatever, Niski, whatever. Because to me, the actual value of a Power of Evil to me, because as we're saying, is sometimes he's not going to be the best. Like, if it's all assassins, he's not going to be the best player. But that's why he wouldn't even be my best player. He would be my second best player. I would have like a god tier top laner, or I'd have the best AD carry, and I'd put them with him, because that's one of the reasons why. This is what the people never got, is that in the modern day, I don't want like a team built around Froggen. I just want Froggen to have one really competent teammate that's really good. And if they're really aggressive, perfect, those styles are going to work awesome.
Can I offer you one Huni?
That wasn't the player I was thinking of.
Monty, he doesn't have $2.3 million. Thorin's not that rich.
Exactly.
Yeah,
If we're gonna talk FlyQuest, we have to talk Ignar though. Man, dude, Ignar on Rakan is something special. Rakan's actually a really difficult champion to flank with because you can get CC'd really easily, and you're really squishy. But Ignar does it so well. He knows where to hide in vision pockets. And then the go-to counter for Rakan is Nautilus, and then Ignar techs this by buying Zhonya's very, very early. It's very interesting to see him play Rakan.
I also think, like, as much as I have always loved Ignar as a player, I think he is fortunate that he has this meta right now where he can just play engaged supports 24/7. Here's another example, Loco. You can't always play engaged supports. You know, sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you just. We've had metas where it's just like, guess what? Here's Nami and Janna for you. You know what I mean? But when all of Ignar's best champs, Alistar, historically, Blitzcrank, which he still plays, Thresh, now Rakan, like they're all enabled. They're all enabled right now. Like, you can't ban him out right now. What a great time to be Ignar.
Yeah. And he's doing great. I think him and Power Beeble are the reason that FlyQuest like became so relevant. Like the switch from Pobelter Wadid to Ignar Power Beeble like revived this org.
So in this matchup that we're gonna see between EG and FlyQuest, I think FlyQuest has a legit shot here.
Yeah, for sure. This time they won't have Viper.
That's true. That's a very good point, because it was only the last game that Solo played in their previous series? I'm trying to remember.
Let's see what happened. Solo played the last 2 games.
2 games, okay. So now Solo's back with the team.
Full-time. Yeah, it looks like he's full-time now. It would be so fucking random. They randomly put in Viper. Oh my god.
Don't you think that's a pretty big upgrade, though, considering that Kumo is the worst part of EG?
Yeah, I think it is a really big upgrade, but also the other thing was FlyQuest had no way to play out early game other than mid lane. Like, Viper couldn't build his own leads, and while Ignar was really good as a player, they didn't build leads from bottom. Anything they had from bottom, they gave it right back to mid lane. So what FlyQuest was going to do was very, very obvious. Like, they're going to look for a lot of 3v3s and 2v2s around mid lane. But now that they have Solo, who's more demanding of the resource, and he can actually play with jungle, it just opens it up completely, right? Going from one way to play out early game to 2 ways is like such a huge difference.
I'll even throw in, I think actually, without making it a whole topic, since there's that whole narrative that has followed Solo his whole career, true or not, that he's like a difficult teammate and he's demanding and he's like can be an arsehole or whatever. This is not a team of players who are going to have a problem with that, as far as I can tell. He's got like pretty chilled, laid-back, like as in terms of personality balance. I think it's a pretty good team for him to be on. I wouldn't see where the clashes would be.
I really want to credit the right person, but someone said something about FlyQuest that I thought was really smart. They said everyone on FlyQuest has a chip on their shoulder and they want to prove something, so they're all good about like for the greater good. Like Ignar and Power Beeble, they both came from like failed teams like CLG not making worlds, Misfits Schalke and like that situation. Turtle, like always, like Turtle's nothing after TSM. Like that's been the big storyline. Honestly, Turtle hasn't been that great though, and Solo not getting an LCS spot, Thorin also like not really having the success that he deserves after TSM. So everyone on FlyQuest has a chip on their shoulder, and they want to be like, hey, we're better than what people think of us, and that identity is really good for the team.
What do you know about the FlyQuest coach? Oh, there's another guy by the
Ray and David. I know both of them very well.
So there's another guy who used to be part of TSM. So it's the TSM coaching diaspora that happens where everyone else gets a TSM coach, but TSM can't keep one for some reason. So what's going on? Like, tell us about them, because I don't know a lot.
David, he started out as an assistant coach for me on Team Liquid. He used to be like a basketball coach, and he was a high-rated
that guy,
player. Yeah. And he coached for TL, and then he went to Europe. He coached for
Schalke.
And,
maybe another team as well. XL, there you go.
And then he came back. David's a really good people person, and he's also really good about working with Koreans. And he's just someone that's very like, he's a really good coach. How to explain? So we have like a board game group And David's always like the one organizing it. And when people are there, like they love hanging out with David. He makes sure everyone like feels great to be there, and that really carries over with his coaching. Like every time like me and Dardoch would have problems, like David would come and help, and like Dardoch listened to David a lot. Like Piglet, when it was being really difficult, David helped with that. I'm sure like Mickey
after watching Breaking Point again, I struggle to believe that, but okay, I'm listening to you.
I'm also pretty sure Mickey on XL did better than he did on Golden Guardians. A lot of that has to do with David. So yeah, he's a really good people person when it comes to coaching. And Curry used to be the analyst for TSM. And then TSM does this thing where they bring in the analyst for 1 week in person to see how they work with people and like if they can upgrade them to coach. And Curry did well in their 1 week trial, and then he slowly moved up to assistant coach, and then he coached Clutch, and then the Clutch went boom, and he coached as a FlyQuest Academy coach, and then they moved Curry up because they thought he did a good job. So he's like the strategic guy, and David's more of like the people guy.
Maybe we should have him on the show.
Yeah, you should get them.
We had them on Listen Local sometime, both of them. So you think you can have them.
They're well spoken, and they'll tell you guys things about FlyQuest.
So do we have predictions for the next week about who is going to win, whether it's EG or FlyQuest? Because I think this one's actually, in some ways, I feel like we were just talking about EG as if it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to make the finals.
So I got all my predictions right up to this point for playoffs. Oh man, but this one's I think going to be the hardest one. EG or FlyQuest.
I don't think any of the other ones were particularly challenging.
I think so. Dom picked TSM over FlyQuest. I think
that was the hardest one for sure.
Yeah. I thought it was obvious FlyQuest because TSM's so inconsistent.
Still went to 5 maps though.
It shouldn't have gone. It shouldn't have though. It shouldn't. I want to say FlyQuest. As much as I love EG, I think FlyQuest with solo is really good, but EG will be smarter in terms of how they deal with Ignar and giving him Rakan. TSM was just so garbage across the entire draft. I'll go FlyQuest. I'll go FlyQuest 3-1.
Where are you going to go on this one, Monty?
Because
I'm leaning to
EG.
EG.
I think I'm going to go with EG myself. It's hard though. I think this one is very difficult.
Like the problem is, if I had to like describe it stylistically, where I think the edges are, I think player strength is EG, and I think like consistency and the more coherent style is probably on FlyQuest's side. So even though that might sound like I should pick FlyQuest, I actually do think in the playoffs, players win you games because you're in the playoff series. If a star player wins you, if Suzuki gets like fucking Yasuo and pops off one game, that's a win. Whereas like to get a win from the FlyQuest side, a lot more has to go right. So I actually think I'll say EG edges it. I'll say EG 3-2. There you go.
I think Svenskeren also was playing really well in that Cloud9 series, and I
thought he was getting dunked in the first 2 games, no?
His Gragas was very impressive towards the end. He was basically holding them in that series a lot of the time with his Gragas ults. Yeah, I think it's going to be close, but I think I do believe that EG is probably I guess I have just a little bit more faith in them. I'm still so reluctant because of Kumo. Like
that's what could win this series.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
time, yeah.
Especially in a high pressure situation like this, and the fact that solo is there now, it really does make me wonder if I believe that EG can win.
I think one thing that EG does really, really well is they know the players they have and they know how to get the most out of them. Like Kumo's on Aatrox, Kumo's on Orin, Kumo's on Set. They know where to put Kumo and they know what to expect out of Kumo. I'm sure he'll play some Poppy too.
Yeah, because nobody's gonna ban that shit. So, I don't know. Actually, yeah, I think actually having seen these last series and having seen solo in for FlyQuest now. I think I actually do have to give the edge to FlyQuest. I have such little faith. I have such little faith in Kumo.
Oh, as like a final topic, how do you think the split's gonna get looked at, or this year in entirety, like due to the whole online play and stuff? Do you think it's gonna get like kind of buried in history and people are just gonna be whatever about it?
Yes.
It has to, unfortunately. Like, I think that is actually genuinely the only fair thing to do. Like, even if I was someone who won a championship this year, part of me would feel like it's like winning. Okay, I'll give you the best example. Look, it's like if you win a lockout season in traditional sports. It's not really the same as winning like a full season. You know, you always feel like, would we even have won? Like, I can never know. So I actually feel bad for everyone who wins their championships. Like one of the things that sucks for Cloud9 is they were on that massive heater. They win every game and win online now. So if they win, even if they'd have won like without losing a game and won the whole split without losing a game, no one would have ever given them the true status of best ever. They would have always had that question mark, right?
The really shitty thing.
It's not even unfair. It's just the way the world is, unfortunately.
The really shitty thing for Cloud9 is I think they would have been better on stage.
Oh, the worst thing ever, dude. The most brutal thing of all of this, if you're an LCS fan, is we'll never know what would have happened at the LAN MSI finals with this Cloud9. And that is a shame because every other region got their chance. When Korea had the unbeatable SK Telecom and Samsung they went to Worlds. When you had the Fnatic went 18-0, or you had the Fnatic with Caps, or you had G2 last year, you got to see what the actual outcome would be. We'll never know. We'll never know what would happen to MSI. And so even though I suspect they could have done a really sick run, sadly that's been denied them. The cruelty of
other strong teams of NA in the past, like the Team Liquid, the TSM, they were never internationally viable in their play style. I felt like the way they played, I felt like was really good for beating NA teams and looking dominant in NA.
C9 actually plays like they could beat international teams. Right
and then now they don't get a shot. Sure, they'll get that online MSI or something.
Because they play much better in terms of their coordination, and they play a style of League of Legends that we know from FPX is actually good.
They play fast.
Yeah.
They're very about closing out.
Yeah, and they're very when they can react really quickly to situations. Their team fighting is excellent. Obviously, the question was always going to be whether on an individual level they would be able to hold up. But if I look at Cloud9's coordination compared to like Korean teams right now, they are way better. Like Korea looks bad right now.
The few games I see of Korea, they play so slow still. Like it's like Korea just does not learn. Like it does not matter how many times they get slapped at Worlds. Like the Chinese way of playing, the European way of playing, the more early game, the more execution focused, the more skill check way of playing. Like they just cannot learn.
Yeah, so unfortunately, like it is super disappointing because I don't think Cloud9 would win MSI, but it's probably
a chance though.
It's probably the biggest chance an NA team has ever had. Because I think that CLG team that went to the finals was a mega fluke.
I've always said this. Everyone ignores this because this is why I'm needed as the esports historian. Because when everyone references CLG going to that final, two pieces of information you need. And once you know these two pieces of information, I don't need to say anything more. One, they got to play Flash Wolves in the semis. That's weird. Why would you be playing Flash Wolves in the semis? Because RNG topped the group and SK Telecom came 4th seed. Yep. So the real best team in the group stage had to then play the team that when they then literally flipped the switch, SK Telecom, and became the best team, just beat you in the semis. So in reality, even though CLG came second, as far as I'm concerned, they were the 3rd best team at that tournament.
Yeah.
Sorry. They might even have been 4th because Flash Wolves actually beat SK Telecom. So even though they beat them head-to-head, guess what, fans? That isn't how actual overall field strength works. So I know it sounds like I'm being a hater, but that was like one of the weakest second... Put it this way, TL finishing second at MSI is way more impressive. They had to beat fucking IG.
Also,
the number one favorite for the tournament.
The only true international success NA has ever had was IEM. That's the only true one.
No, it wasn't. It was not. You know it wasn't. You know that the Koo Tigers were trolling, which they were.
That's how much the Koreans are, like, you know, for the greater good. They were willing to sacrifice that semi-final just to give Loco something in his goddamn career. Another Korean. There you go.
I think you look at that CLG roster, right? Like from that tournament. Where are they now?
Who he was the mid laner for God's sake.
Like, who is he? Yeah, Stix. Who is that? Stixay, Huhi, Afro,
Darshan, Mr. President. And Xmitty.
Okay, so Xmithy is like literally the only player with any level of relevance from that roster.
And he's
right
not
now.
that great now either, to be fair. So, whatever. It is what it is.
Wow, Tony must have been a god tier coach. That's what that tells me.
I think Tony
did a good job.
I think Tony is a good coach. I think Zix actually, it's been impressive to me to see what Zix has done with 100 Thieves, considering that they way overperformed based on their roster strength.
By the way, Loco, everyone's going to talk bad. Everyone was loving shitting on Zix at the end of last year. Mate, him almost winning in spring now with TSM. That's like that looks like paradise compared to where TSM is right now. Like,
according to TSM, that was
there's people in TSM would sell their fucking children to get back to that place. Like, that's outrageous. Like, now he looks like fucking Jesus. Like, they wish they had him back.
I was meaning, I know Tony's a great coach. Tony gets most out of their players, or most out of his players always. I mean, 100 Thieves, this roster, like, it's counterintuitive, but they're like, we don't play early game anymore. We just play late game, and it worked for them. We just play team fights, and they got to where they got.
People will point at someday and say, yeah, well, someday you could make an argument that he's the best top laner. But again, we've been over that. Even if he is, it's a very weak position right now. The positions that he had, like Ryoma is a non-factor in the laning phase and is basically just like where map pressure goes to die. Stunt is right? Bad. Like,
Here's how
it's
you
like
know.
Meteos and Cody Sun and Someday. They're just trying to carry all these other people across the finish line.
The way you know you can't play just through top lane and win the whole game from that is that Someday and Alfari will be watching the motherfucking finals of their regions. And they might be the best top laners. Like, at least the Someday one's debatable. But, like, these guys are monsters, but you just can't you can't do like my old school Flame example and just put everything through the top lane. Like, you won't win the game if you do that. Yeah, and there's too many. Everyone in the top lane, the champions they play generally, like, you can just play stuff that vaguely neutralizes the other guy or just doesn't lose as hard. You can't do that in some of the other roles.
Yeah, and it's gotten a little better with Bork getting buffed and people playing more Bork champions. But last year there was Spear of Shojin. That item really enabled top laners to carry team fights and carry split push situations. Like, we don't have that now.
I do have hope for 100 Thieves as well, because at the very least, they can still import a player because Ryoma is himself an import. So there could be potentially a cool move in there at some point in the future for 100 Thieves. Like, I also don't hate, I think Ryoma is a rookie player and he hasn't been particularly inspiring to me, but I think you could definitely put him on your academy roster and just sort of see what happens, right? It's got to be better than Soligo.
So you want him replaced? That's what you're saying.
Ryoma? Yes. I want Ryoma to spend more time developing an academy and out of LCS. Does anybody want to see Ryoma in LCS anymore?
Oh, no, here's the thing. I agree with the sentiment. I also want to see Ryoma on an academy team, and then I want to cut the entire academy system. I hope I've been clear there. I hope I haven't got any mixed messages. I'm sending it.
I think it's impressive that 100 Thieves has been able to do as well as they have been, given that Stunt and Ryoma are on that roster.
Yeah, they overperformed, and Cloud9 called it. They're like, you guys are the number 2. You guys are the higher seed, but we don't think you're that good.
I'll tell you right now a move that you could make, and I think it would make 100 Thieves a contender. If you put Power of Evil in the mid lane on 100 Thieves,
he'd be great for
even
that team,
stylistically between Cody Sun and Someday. That's fucking perfect.
Yes,
because if people don't remember, also the other thing about Someday, his entire career that's been impressive is he's played most of his career as like the fucking tank and bruiser player. Like, he could do that if he needed to, as well as carry.
I'm down for the Fly Thieves roster combination where I get Someday, Meteos, Power of Evil, Cody Sun, and Ignar. Give me that fucking roster. Give me that fucking roster.
I take Centauran there over Meteos, but I get what you mean.
I don't know if I would.
I don't think he's 9.5, but I think Centauran's a really solid.
No, he's had a good split for sure. I'd probably make them fight for the roster slot. I think that's the hardest call to make. But I think that, and also you might want to take Santorin because he does have the synergy now with Power of Evil. But I think that Meteos has a higher upside than Santorin does. So I'd be more tempted to go in that direction, I think.
Maybe.
And also, one thing I've always liked about Meteos is I actually have no idea what a shot caller he is in that sense, but it doesn't seem like he's someone who needs in any way to be microed by his laners. So as a result, I love putting him with laners who have a set style of play. They're just going to play around them the way you should.
Yeah, I actually think that him with Power View would probably be pretty fun to watch too. But that would be my preference. You would take Santorin though?
Yeah, I would definitely take Santorin. I think Lucas is really good right now. I think Meteos, like, honestly, he hasn't been that great. His early game's been really whack.
What the fuck is he supposed to do? He never has mid pressure. How does he how is he even in games in this meta, dude? Like, where your mid is always just getting slammed. You have no control of the map. You can't even get scuttle crabs a lot of the time. Like, it's horrible to be a jungler in that situation.
Yeah, I think jungle is the role that's most jungle support. Like, whenever you have a shitty team, you look the worst, but still, like, there's just some pathing mistakes that Meteos has had. Like, even in the game versus Closer, like, he was getting out past really hard, like getting buff stolen left and right. Like, that didn't have to do with like mid pressure. Like, this is not his best split. This is not like a good Meteos split. Once, like, if you look back on it, I just don't think Meteos was that great this split.
I think he did a lot with the very limited tools that he was given, and the fact that he couldn't rely on any roaming or any pressure from his mid laner at any point in time. I think that in the way the jungle experience in gold works right now, it's actually a miracle that he wasn't like 2 levels behind every single game.
Okay, so the other jungler that I feel like had a really weak mid laner is xMid, and I think xMid did more with Ica than Meteos did with Ryoma.
That's probably fair.
I mean, you need a fucking microscope to find the difference in this scenario anyway, to what you saw. It's not really that significant, is it? Because let's face it, Smithy didn't really have a great time with this split either, did he, Loco? This was fucking pretty bad for him.
Yeah.
Speaking of people who are on the team that makes no sense whatsoever for them, whoever the GM is of Immortals, just go fuck yourself. I can say shit like that. So I'm not officially with anyone. Just so from me, Thorin, to you, GM of Immortals, go fuck yourself.
And thank you for participating in Flash.
Exactly. There you go. Well, no, look, I tell them IVR to go fuck themselves all the time. So don't even worry about that. It's the same org.
All right. Well, I think that should wrap us up. This has been a long show already, but super fun. Thanks for joining us, Loco.
Thanks for having me on.
We'll be back next week, probably with C9 players, considering they should be winning. So I think we'll probably have some.
Don't jinx it.
Yeah, knock on wood, right? If they win, I think we should be able to have some C9 players to sort of dissect the finals performance, which will be, I think, uniquely informative. So there we go. See you guys next week.